Maybe Tom Cruise as the Master.
Possibly.
Alright everyone, hello and welcome to a new episode of the Screenplay Archaeology podcast. I am your host, KiramidHead.
And I return, Deusdaecon, once again.
Yes, he has regenerated into a new episode. That's a great...
Getting that in right away.
Yeah, getting that right away. And the subject for tonight's episode is going to be an unproduced script for a Doctor Who movie, which would have been written around 88 or so. The draft has not dated. There's actually a confusing thing I'll talk about later because I found an identical copy with a date on it elsewhere, but I'll talk about that later. So yeah, we're going to be covering that. But before we jump in, and I just want to give the usual spiel of check us out on Facebook, Tumblr, Twitter, and Blogger. We're on iTunes, we're on Stitcher Radio. Leave a review on iTunes, I'll read it off. There's supposed to be a new one I was going to read for this episode, but I was told, someone told me they posted one, but I couldn't find it on there. And so sorry if it turns up literally right after we record this, my apologies. I'll just put it in the next one. And also if you're interested in this subject matter, check out the Shelved Film podcast. They talk about scripts as well. And they just finally started up their new season last month, so go give their stuff a listen. And to jump into it, we're covering Doctor Who, the movie, written by Johnny Byrne. And now before we go into the background, I'm just going to summarize this plot a little bit, is that you have the Doctor who's trying to stop this evil Time Lord called Varnax, who wants to create true immortality, which for some reason, which is not really made clear why this is a bad thing until like 30 pages before the end, but it's going to cause a lot of people to die because he's really single-minded about it, and there's this whole thing where they have a history together, and he picks up like this motley crew of companions along the way, and they travel through space and time trying to stop this guy from getting the artifacts that he needs to pull off his plan.
It's very Guardians of the Galaxy.
It's very complicated. Thanos, this guy is not.
Yeah.
So to go into the background, I mean, you're the Doctor Who expert here. I mean, I have rudimentary knowledge.
Well, yeah, I mean, I wouldn't really call myself an expert. Petty dabbler, I'd say.
Yes, but compared to me.
Yeah. I mean, I know enough to keep me going, really. I mean, should I just go through what old Who was?
Yeah, just go through it, doctor by doctor, give kind of the generic overview.
Right, well, first of all, Doctor Who, the show, was created by Sidney Newman, who was head of the BBC at the time, because he decided that there needed to be an educational but fun show for kids. And that was the original purpose. It was designed for kids to be a history education thing. So the Doctor would go to different times and experience the times and have adventures there. So that was the original idea. He had the idea. There was a man and a woman who actually created the idea, but I can't remember their names, unfortunately. Don't kill me for that.
Revisionist history.
Yeah. So the first series was quite ambitious because it was filmed live. It was actually live on TV, which is why it's so difficult to actually get episodes of it. You had William Hartnell, who was a very classic, very old at the time, English actor. And his Doctor is very different to what you'd see today. He played it as this old man, kind of crotchety at first, but he became more warm as the show became more popular. And the idea was, he also had his granddaughter with him as well, which is never really touched upon in New Who. But the idea was that the Doctor is an alien. He's a Time Lord. They are the rulers of time. They can travel through time and space in their TARDIS, time and relative dimensions in space. The Time Lords are from Gallifrey. They have 2 hearts. That's important for the movie, at least. And yeah, they're kind of the usual Time Lords. They're kind of sanctimonious. They're a bit aloof. They don't really care about the universe, and they just kind of sit at home doing not much.
Like us.
So so the Doctor decided to nick a TARDIS, Type 40 TARDIS, and travel the universe with his granddaughter. The interesting thing, which I did want to mention because it's actually important for this script as well, is that there are three different types of Gallifreyan. There's a Gallifreyan who is basically kind of like a human, but with two hearts. Then you have a Time Lord who is a Gallifreyan who has gone to the academy, and they are actually given the ability to regenerate. So not all Gallifreyans can regenerate, only Time Lords can. And then within those Time Lords, you have renegade Time Lords who are out and about traveling and kind of going against what the High Council wants. And I actually have it written down here. I don't know if this is true. In quite a few, mostly in the books, but certain Time Lords, when they have done something very wrong, they have what's known as elective semantectomy, which is a very fancy word to say that their entire names are erased from time. So that is why they don't have a name. They are known as the Doctor or the Master or the Monk.
Very, very ancient Egyptian.
Exactly, yes. And they have this procedure so they will not embarrass their families, basically. And it's a very interesting concept. I don't know if that's canon anymore, but that does explain why they are known as the Doctor and blah, 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 blah. So yeah, that's basically the overview of the species. The Doctor himself, like I said, starts off as William Hartnell. Very educational, very much for children, but because it was made at that time of TV, it was still good for adults as well. And of course, that series introduced the staples that we know today. Hartnell was the first to encounter the Daleks, for example. If you need to know what a Dalek is, think a pepper pot with a gun. And basically Nazi sensibilities.
Always an old chestnut.
Yes. And like I said, Time Lords, they have the ability to regenerate, which is actually quite a genius move. Again, a Sidney Newman idea. Because William Hartnell, sadly, was unable to remember his lines at the end. He just couldn't do it. He was just too... Old. I don't know what it was. I think it was just...
the effects of age, stuff like that.
Yeah, it was just that, really. So he couldn't remember his lines, so they decided instead of just stopping the show, the Doctor will regenerate. He has the ability to regenerate. And in this case, he wasn't actually killed. He just died of old age, which has happened a few times, actually.
Oh, interesting.
So he died of old age, and that's one of the episodes of Hartnell's we don't have. His last episode in which he regenerates. We've only got the audio, sadly.
They'll have to animate it then.
Yeah. Well, it's because at the time the BBC thought there weren't any reason to keep them, so they just threw them away.
Yeah, that happened with some of the Quatermass stuff as well.
Yeah, it's really annoying, but that's the time. Anyway, so carry on. What were you going to say?
Oh, I was just saying that happened with the Quatermass stuff as well, because the first Quatermass serial, like 2/3 of it is gone, but apparently the quality of the recording was really bad, so...
Yeah, but that was just the thing that happened. Quatermass was the precursor to Doctor Who. That's where it came from. But anyway, so you had William Hartnell. He retired and then came back as Patrick Troughton, who...
I know him from a bunch of stuff.
Yeah, you probably know him from The Omen.
He's in The Omen. He's in loads of Hammer movies as like random evil minion, and he's in the Harryhausen film Sinbad and the Eye of the Tiger. And he does this really stupid shit where he feeds like a magical potion to like a bee.
Yeah.
It's like, what did you think was... It turns giant and tries to kill him. I'm like, what the fuck did you think would happen?
Yeah. So that's Patrick Troughton. And when he came into the role, it kind of changed it, as you know, new Doctors tend to do. It became a lot more action-packed and a bit more fun, although that implies that it wasn't fun before, but you know what I mean. Yeah. So it's got a lot more. Unfortunately, Patrick Troughton is the one that we have the least episodes, I believe.
That's a shame.
Yeah, those are the ones that are missing the most. So we have not a lot of comprehensive history of his, which is very sad. But his last one was War Games, which I managed to see. Very interesting, because there's a lot of stuff with a guy who was kind of the Master, but not. But I'm getting ahead of myself. But at the end, he's basically carted back to Gallifrey, finally, for stealing the TARDIS. And because of all the bad things he's done, or what they consider bad, which is tampering with time and all this stuff, they decide to exile him to Earth and force him to regenerate. There's actually a really great scene in the last episode of Patrick Troughton's where they give him different pictures to choose his next generation. And he's like, oh, he's too old, he's too fat, I don't like his nose. It's really funny. So yeah, there was a lot of comedy with Patrick Troughton, because he kind of had... he was deliberately made to look like a tramp. That was his costume, basically. So yeah, it was very strange.
I want to clarify for the American viewers: tramp as in homeless guy, not as in slut.
Yeah. A homeless guy, a hobo. Sorry. Yeah, he was. It made him look like a hobo. But I mean that kind of phased out further on, to be honest. But that's how he started. He started out looking at this weird hobo, and he had a recorder with him at all times that he liked to play. But yeah, like I said, there's not much about his, but they are really good stories. After this is going to be really long, I do apologize.
That's okay.
After Patrick Troughton, like I said, he was exiled to Earth, forced to regenerate, and he became John Pertwee, Sean Pertwee's father.
Frequently killed actor Sean Pertwee's father.
Yes, and that was a really weird series, and I mentioned before we started recording that he's my least favorite Doctor, mainly because he was trapped on Earth. There was no TARDIS stuff because the TARDIS didn't work anymore. The Time Lord stopped the TARDIS from working. So the entire series was literally him trying to get the TARDIS to work again. And he stayed on Earth and he started working with UNIT, United Nations Intelligence Task Force, I think it is. And they're basically generic soldiers who will get killed by the monster of the week.
The red shirts.
Exactly. And but there was a lot of interesting stuff introduced with John Pertwee, namely, which is important for the movie, the Master. The Master is basically the Doctor, but evil. That's basically it.
There's
a lot of stuff.
He's the ironmonger of the series.
Yeah, basically, and he just showed up and he's just evil. He kills a guy with a plastic chair. It's ridiculous.
That's some Jason shit right there.
Yeah, because the first episode the Master shows up in is called The Terror of the Autons, and the Autons are basically imagine store mannequins come to life that can shoot you in the face. That was basically what they did. And they're I can't remember what they were called, but they were plastic creatures, basically creatures that lived in plastic. And the Master was manipulating the Autons and all this stuff. And of course the Master gets away because the Master always gets away. But that set up the Master as being kind of the nemesis, the Moriarty to the Doctor's Sherlock.
As long as it's not the Sherlock version of Moriarty.
No. And John Pertwee's last episode, Planet of the Spiders, I think it was.
Ugh.
He basically just got a massive dose of radiation from Metebelis 3, which I'm still surprised I remember that. And that was, he managed to get the TARDIS to work. He went to Metebelis 3 and all this stuff, and he got irradiated and then died. Well, he came back to Earth, collapsed on the floor, and then died. And then he became Tom Baker. Baker.
I've actually seen 2 of these.
Yes. Arguably the longest running Doctor.
And I also know him from Golden Voyage of Sinbad, where he played the bad guy. And that's the role that got him the Doctor. Yeah.
I'd be very surprised if people don't know who Tom Baker is. Because he is definitely the most famous Doctor. Everyone knows him as the Doctor.
I want to say he was the first one to be shown widely outside of the UK.
Yes, exactly. And he has some fantastic episodes, because I think he had 7 years at least.
He had a long time, because he went from
time.
Because he went to 1980 or something like that.
Yeah. And there's a hell of a lot of episodes, and it set up a lot of stuff. So you have the most notable episode for Tom Baker would be what was it called? For God's sake.
Well, if we can't remember, we can just blow by it.
Yeah.
We don't need to go into that much detail.
No, but it is Genesis. That was it. Genesis of the Daleks. Because the Daleks are, again, the big enemy, apart from the Master, that the Doctor always fights. And that was the first episode that gave the Daleks this really well-rounded, interesting backstory. That's really interesting. I won't go into much detail. Basically, they were created by Space Hitler, known as Davros, who's a bit nuts. And it had... What was interesting about that episode is that it gave a real moral quandary to the Doctor that you see further on. That was not so much in the previous stuff, but it became more after this. Because he had this thing where he was tasked by the Time Lords to go and kill the Daleks before they became the Dalek. And arguably, that was the first salvo, so to speak, in the Time War.
So the Doctor was basically the Terminator.
Essentially, the Daleks Terminator. But there's this whole speech he does. That's fantastic. Do I have the right to to kill these creatures that arguably, yes, they've killed a lot of people, but they have changed the universe. And is that the right thing to do? And all this stuff is very interesting stuff. So anyway, that's the most notable, arguably the most notable episode he ever did for me.
The ones I've seen Pyramids of Mars, which I thought was actually pretty good.
Yes.
And I thought it was cool how Sutek, not that other one from Puppet Master, how he doesn't leave his chair, but he still is incredibly intimidating.
Yeah, and that's another good episode. I mean, like I said, there's loads of good episodes.
And the other one I saw of his was Face of Evil, where like he's on like a jungle planet with primitive people, and there's like a mountain carved in his face, and there's a computer in the likeness of his mind. And it was an interesting story, but too much of it was the jungle people arguing in their council hut.
Yeah, sorry, go on.
No, I do like his portrayal because it has like almost every one of his things that he does. Like it's almost like he brings a different facet to the performance every time he does it.
Yes, he has this. I don't know how you can describe it, but he's
material.
Yeah, and he pretends to be bumbling, but he actually knows exactly what he's doing. And he has this really sort of sinister grin about him that he always gives. And he was the one to introduce the jelly babies, offering people jelly babies.
Everybody remembers that.
So anyway, to carry on from Tom Baker, his last episode, I can't remember the name.
It's Logopolis, I think.
Logopolis, that was right. And that involves the Master doing his thing. The Master has run out of regenerations at this point.
Not that stops him.
No, because he just possesses new people. Ironically, people who kind of looked very similar to what he did before. But anyway.
He has a type he likes.
Yes. And all that stuff. And basically at the end of Logopolis, well, to explain Logopolis, throughout the episode you see a creature known as the Watcher. And you're never really too sure what's going on there. It's kind of creepy. He's just standing in the background, watching, as he does.
He likes to watch.
Yeah. And so you're not too sure, but at the end of the episode, the Doctor falls from this giant satellite. He falls and basically dies. And then you find out that the Watcher was kind of like a weird alternate reality thing of the Doctor. There's a few theories. I won't go into it. Basically, it's the Doctor, and he merges, and that's when he regenerates and becomes Peter Davidson.
I've actually seen that regeneration clip on SF Debris.
Oh, yeah.
And what struck me about it the most is the music sounds like they got Link to play as Ocarina.
Yeah, it's really weird. I hate that music. But yeah, so Peter Davidson, who was arguably the most well-known actor to play the Doctor at the time, because he was in All Creatures Great and Small and all this stuff.
I have seen that show when I was real little.
Yeah, it's terrible.
The only thing I remember, and I may have imagined this, was an episode about they get like a monkey with diarrhea and it's shit all over the office. I don't know if that was real.
I wouldn't be surprised, but there's a lot of that crap. But anyway, that was kind of interesting because, like I said, he was actually really well known and famous before he became the Doctor. So it was strange. And he, again, changed the Doctor into a much more active Doctor. He got rid of the sonic screwdriver, for example.
Yeah, I know that's one of those iconic things that comes and goes and comes and goes.
Well, it was introduced in Patrick Troughton's era, and then it was used very minimally for quite a while. But now it's become like the magic catch-all key thing. It really is Deus Ex Machina. But anyway.
Unless you got a Patang.
Like I said, Peter Davison, much more active, started playing cricket, no idea why. Started wearing a vegetable.
Well, it's because cricket is it's a racial memory of an intergalactic war, as we know from Hitchhiker's Guide.
Funny you should say that, though. Douglas Adams did write some really good episodes of Doctor Who.
Yeah.
Arguably some of the better ones. But anyway.
He was a supervisor for a while, wasn't he?
Yeah. And Peter Davison is the one where my mind goes blank because I have not seen a lot of his stuff. But there's a few good ones. There's a good Cyberman episode. Cybermen are basically humanoid-looking robots without emotions. They were introduced actually in William Hartnell's era.
And aren't they a bit different every time they show up?
Kind of. When they first showed up, they were from Mondas, which is kind of like an alternate reality of Earth. And yeah, they looked very weird and really creepy, actually. They had these weird sort of latex faces. Ugh. But as they came back, they became more robotic, and now they are just robots. Although in the most recent series with Capaldi, they brought back the Mondasian Cybermen, and they were still creepy. But anyway, they're getting back. There's a really good Cyberman episode But there's a few good Dalek episodes again, but there's not a lot notable with Peter Davison, at least not for me.
Yeah, from what I understand, he's not necessarily considered bad. It's just not one people recommend a whole lot.
No, he's very much in the middle. He kind of stays the course, and it's nothing brilliant, nothing terrible. And that was it, really. And I can't remember. I've seen his regeneration, but I do not know the regeneration episode.
So let's just jump into...
So, I mean, yeah, so you just carry on with that. Castrovalva is Peter Davison's first episode, which is interesting. But anyway, he regenerates, has a bit of a problem this time round. The regeneration doesn't go well, and it kind of messes up. And that's what introduces the zero room in the TARDIS, which stabilizes him and all this stuff. But anyway, but when he regenerates into Colin Baker, who's the next guy... Colin Baker is an interesting one because he is famously known as people's least favorite Doctor.
And he's most known for his wardrobe.
Which was an explosion in a fireworks factory or something like that.
Looks like all the M&Ms got just crushed and made into that jacket.
Yeah, pretty much. It's dreadful. It is a dreadful, just horrible patchwork coat. But he does have some interesting episodes, but for the most part, people remember him as being terrible, which is a shame. Because I don't think he deserves it, and he's gotten a lot better when they did audio plays.
And I've actually seen like a little bit of a clip of, what was it called, Trial of a Time Lord?
Oh yeah, Trial of a Time Lord is really interesting.
And he seemed pretty good in that.
Yeah, and that was like at the end of the era, when he started to really get into the role.
Like jacket aside.
And there's a lot of interesting stuff with the character, and basically his character was the reason why the BBC were starting to think they were going to cancel it. Because that was when the show was really getting bad ratings. It didn't help.
It went on hiatus for a while in the middle.
Yeah, they made it go on hiatus. It didn't help that they kept changing the time slot, and the time slot was going crazy.
They put it up against Coronation Street.
Yeah, exactly. One of the most well-known and well-loved soaps in all of UK history, and they expected it to do well. And I don't know who it was. I think it was JTL, the showrunner at the time. I think his name was JTL. He said, regardless of what TV show you had, if you put it through what Doctor Who went through, nothing would succeed, ever. They just wanted to kill it.
It's the Constantine of British TV.
Yeah, it really is. But they continued with another series, Colin Baker Regenerated. However, and you can watch the regeneration, it's really bad. First of all, the Doctor regenerates by banging his head. Seriously, he just falls over and then regenerates. But the worst part is the controversy came when Colin Baker said that, okay, I'm going to leave the role, but at least give me the first episode. At least give me that to give the character a good send-off. They refused. So he refused to come back for the regeneration.
Oh.
So when he regenerates, they obscure Sylvester McCoy's face and gave him a horrendous Harpo Marx-style wig. Seriously, watch it, and it looks so bad.
I might have to.
And it's just Sylvester McCoy in a wig, and it's dreadful. But anyway, and then he became Sylvester McCoy.
Who myself and a lot of the current generation probably know best as Red Against the Brown.
Exactly,
The bird shit wizard.
Yeah. So yeah, weird character, because the prevailing story about his character was that Doctor Who showrunner saw Sylvester McCoy at a party and saw him playing the spoons. And he said to him, "That's great, you should do that on the show." And he had to say, "Oh no, I'm being serious." And he does. He plays the spoons in his first episode. And it's ridiculous. Basically, they brought Sylvester McCoy in and they wanted him to be this weird comedic bumbler. However, over time, he became arguably the most intelligent of all the Doctors. He became the chess master.
That's what everyone says.
Yeah, the chess master, the Machiavellian schemer, and like I said, the smartest of all the Doctors. Which is interesting considering how he regenerates. Because that's not how he gets to go out. He doesn't get to go out saving the world. Do you want me to talk about the movie?
We can talk about the movie. I mean, it doesn't really relate that much to the script. Basically, okay, in between... Well, it sort of overlaps a little bit, but in between the show's cancellation and when that TV movie was made, that's when all these different attempts at making a Doctor Who theatrical film and TV stuff, like, it's a really complicated history. That's when all that stuff happens. And
the show got cancelled But they made a few scripts. Like, I think this one was possibly one of the scripts that when the show was still on.
Yeah, they started, according to the book I have, it's called The Nth Doctor by Jean-Marc and Randy Lefissier.
Mm.
They say that like it was these two effects guys who had worked in British TV for the BBC, and they had worked on Doctor Who. When the hiatus happened, that's when they decided to get the rights from like the business side of the BBC, because they're actually like two different companies.
Yeah, it's weird.
And so they got the film rights with that, with all these like stipulations, what they could or couldn't do. And so this was this whole lengthy back and forth, movies, and then Amblin TV got involved in Universal, and eventually it ended up at Fox, where they made the TV movie that came out, which is sometimes called The Enemy Within.
Well, I've never seen it called that, to be honest.
According to the book, apparently people referred to it as that during production. It's just not officially called that.
Yeah. I think the novelization is called that, but I could be wrong.
Which, to be fair, it doesn't really fit.
No,
based on what I know of the plot.
But yeah, but do you want me to go into the movie just to get it out there?
Just a little bit, yeah.
Right,
give your unpopular hot take.
Yeah. So the movie basically starts where the TV show left off, with Sylvester McCoy as the Doctor. Unfortunately, the chess master, the schemer, the smartest man in the universe, gets gunned down in a gang war,
and then gets killed by medical malpractice.
Yeah, he gets shot. Basically, okay, I'm getting ahead of myself. The film starts with the Master on trial and being executed by the Daleks.
Because
there's no reason for them to ever do that. They're pretty much a shoot-to-kill kind of race. They don't do that. So that was weird. That's the first change they made. So anyway, but the Master had a final request for the Doctor to take his remains back to Gallifrey, because that doesn't sound dodgy at all. And the Doctor does it. Again, no idea why. He's killed him at least twice. I don't know why he would give him the pleasure. But anyway, so the Doctor takes his remains back to Gallifrey, but the Master gets free because he never stays dead, and he gets free in the form of this weird gooey worm, kind of a snake,
like Jason Voorhees.
Yes,
but no one's going to understand what that means. But
no. Now in the novelization, I mentioned this before we started. Now in the novelization, because the Master has the ability to possess other beings instead of regenerating, he possessed this Gallifreyan snake, apparently. So it's not the Master in snake form. He is just possessing a weird ethereal snake.
How did he get it? If he was
I don't know. It's weird.
But no, so it breaks out, blah, blah, blah.
He breaks out and messes with the TARDIS, and the TARDIS lands in 1999.
Because this was made in the 90s.
New Year's Eve, 1999, in San Francisco. And then the Doctor steps out of the TARDIS and gets gunned down.
Immediately gets gunned down.
Like seconds.
I've seen that clip. It's almost like a spoof of what they think an American city is like.
It's true, yeah.
It's made by an American company, too.
Yeah, and then the Master goes off and possesses Eric Roberts. I'm sure people know who Eric Roberts is.
Yeah, people have seen The Dark Knight, and
of course.
More than have seen Dead or Alive, I guess.
So Eric Roberts was the Master. And then, while under surgery to get the bullets removed. The bullets are non-fatal, by the way. It was very much a non-fatal shooting, and he would have been fine, but because the Doctor has two hearts, the medical probe they were using gets stuck, and they kill him. He dies on the operating table, and it is quite bad. He literally dies screaming. It's so cringy and just dreadful. But anyway...
Sorry. That's just so funny. It's like a Three Stooges sketch.
Yeah, no. So anyway, and it's explained that due to the anesthetic, it nearly stopped the regenerative process, as he says. And that's why it takes a little bit longer. But Sylvester McCoy then becomes Paul McGann.
Whom I know best as the insane, crazy, bald guy from Alien 3 who thinks the alien is God.
Yes. Or I from Withnell and I.
Yeah, but he also, and also depending on which cut you watch, he completely disappears from the movie.
Yes. So anyway, but at that point in the film, he has no memories. He doesn't know who he is at the time. Not that it matters, because it resolves pretty quickly anyway.
He has amnesia.
But the basic premise is that the Master has no more regenerations. The limit for a Time Lord is 13 regenerations. 13 lives, but 12 regenerations. And anything more than that, you just can't do.
And of course,
they subsequently changed that for the new series.
Yeah, I was going to say, New Who bullshitted around that.
Well, it kind of made sense, but not great. But anyway.
Well, it made sense, but it's still kind of bullshitty retconning.
Yeah, but from what I can tell in the new series, he's just been given a fresh 12, new 12 regenerations.
He bought
the
DLC.
He hasn't been given unlimited.
He bought the DLC.
Yeah, exactly. but a lot of people misunderstand and think that he just has unlimited regenerations now. I don't think so. He's just been given a regeneration cycle, which are 12. So I genuinely believe that they will only do 10 more Doctors at least.
You really think they're going to stop with their moneymaker?
No. They will obviously continue it if it's still a moneymaker, but they will have to give a new excuse why. They're not just going to continue it without an excuse, is my point.
You see, he's going to turn into an American doctor, and Americans get more regenerations. I'll do it. I'll do it for like a season.
Since he's American, he can regenerate. It just costs a lot more than it does in the UK.
Oh,
controversial. Ooh.
Social commentary. We're George Romero right now.
Yeah. Anyway, the basic premise of the movie is that, like I said, the Master has run out of regenerations and he wants to steal the Doctors. And he does that by opening the Eye of Harmony, which is a chamber in the TARDIS. The Eye of Harmony is basically a collapsing black hole. Or rather, a sun collapsing into a black hole in perpetual stasis.
So it's it's kind of like a Romulan ship.
Kind of.
Because they're powered by black holes.
Yeah.
It's
kind of like that.
I'm relating it to the science fiction I'm actually familiar with.
Yeah. But, I mean, the way it works is that I think the Eye of Harmony is just a black hole, actually. No. It's like... It's something complicated, like a sun collapsing into a black hole.
The technical side doesn't really matter for the
No, I'm getting distracted, sorry. That's how complicated it is. But that's how time travel works. And the fact that he opened up the Eye of Harmony, all of Earth is going to get sucked into it by midnight, and they have to stop it. Hooray, they do. The Master gets sucked into the Eye of Harmony and is dead forever until he's brought back in the new series.
Forever in finger quotes.
Yes, but that's basically the TV movie. I like it. Because Paul McGann is my favourite Doctor, and I love the audio plays he does.
And you love the TARDIS.
The TARDIS design is really cool. I love the big open space TARDIS, which they've kind of brought back for New Who.
And they have the big library in it.
That's pretty much everything up to the movie. Do you want me to continue with the New Who stuff?
We can do it a bit quicker. Because it's not really as relevant.
Yeah, it's not really as relevant. But I'll be quicker.
Yeah, be quicker, and we'll take a little bit longer on Jodie Whittaker, because that's the stuff I actually know.
Yeah. Fair enough. Basically, Doctor Who came back in 2005 by Russell T Davies. Russell T Davies brought Christopher Eccleston in as the Ninth Doctor.
Eccleston, also known as Destro from G.I. Joe.
Yes, or the bad guy from the second Thor film.
Or from 28 Days Later.
Christopher Eccleston is the Ninth Doctor. Now, Russell T Davies brought in the concept of the Time War, which is a long-standing war between the Daleks and the Time Lords. And before the series starts, the Doctor, somehow, we don't know how, eradicated both races from the universe and completely stopped the war. And he is the only survivor, the last of the Time Lords.
Well, that's one way to do it.
Yeah, and that's basically his entire thing for the first series. He's very resentful. He's very angry. He's very mopey, is the Doctor, in the Ninth Doctor, anyway. And then at the end, Daleks come back, as they do. The Daleks are defeated, and then because he absorbs the entire heart of the TARDIS, somehow, it then kills him. Christopher Eccleston leaves after one series. There was a lot of controversy behind the scene.
And it's still not all known.
No, there's a lot of stuff between Eccleston and the BBC. It's weird. Anyway, Eccleston then became David Tennant. Arguably, New Who that's people's favourite for New Who.
I like the little bit that I've seen. Let me just get this out of the way early. I saw like those 5 or so specials that he did as his ending. So I went from being fun to I don't know what's going on because it's the culmination of the series.
Yeah. The last episode, which is...
The End of Time.
The End of Time, yeah.
Which I was actually quoting Highlander the Source there because I've actually watched that movie.
But yeah. And David Tennant had a huge run. He bet basically everything. Cybermen, Daleks, the Master, Davros, everything. I mentioned Davros was the creator of the Daleks, right?
Yes, you did.
Yeah, okay, good. Anyway, and then he dies. There's a lot of stuff going on where the Time Lords return, but the Time Lords are kind of nuts and they kind of want to destroy everything and they want to become like physicalless, ethereal beings. It's really weird.
That's what was...
Yeah, they basically want to destroy all of reality. So he has to send them back. And then he dies in a very unceremonious way. Don't need to go into that. there's a whole lot of stuff that it was set up for the entire show, but I won't go into that.
I did like his ending where he says, "I don't want to go."
Yes, that was his last words. I don't want to go, which personally I'm not a fan of, because it really set up. It basically made it sadder than it needed to be, and that gives the next guy a harder job to convince people to continue watching. You know.
And by the way, if you haven't seen Doctor Who, you probably know David Tennant as Kilgrave.
Oh, yeah. David Tennant's much more famous nowadays.
One of the best things in the MCU.
Yes, exactly. Anyway, there's a lot of stuff behind, story-wise that I can't really go into because it'd just be too long. But anyway.
Yeah, I wouldn't know what the hell you were talking about anyways. So.
Exactly. Although, the one thing I will say about David Tennant is that after he was killed, he then stuck around for another 15 minutes. He had the longest send-off of any Doctor we've ever had. 15 minutes.
Oh, yeah, he went around fucking saying goodbye to everybody, didn't he?
Yeah, he was saying goodbye to everyone, and it was so saccharine.
I remember that.
Anyway, and then he had his last lines of "I don't want to go."
And he crossed over into Torchwood for a few minutes, I remember that.
But then he became Matt Smith, which was when the show changed again, because they changed the way it was filmed. It was filmed, it looked much nicer.
It got taken over that's when Moffat took over.
Yeah, Stephen Moffat took over from Russell T Davies. That's not really a good thing in the long run, because Moffat loves the mystery box. But anyway.
We don't need to go too much into that.
No. Matt Smith. And it was much more fantasy. He had a much more fairy tale fantasy idea, and all this stuff. That just changed the show. It changed from science fiction to sort of science fantasy almost. And I should mention, I'm still waiting for the MCU to snatch up Matt Smith because they got the first two. Yeah, absolutely. And Matt Smith had a good run. I like Matt Smith. A lot of good episodes with Matt Smith. And you love Amy Pond. And yeah, I like Amy Pond because Karen Gillan's awesome. And not just because of Matt Smith, he and David Tennant and John Hurt were in the 50th special, which was actually in cinemas in the UK. Oh, I don't know if there might have been a Fathom event here. Probably. But to explain, John Hurt played the Doctor before he became the Ninth Doctor. The Eighth Doctor... They cheated a bit there. Yeah, well, kind of, yeah. Well, the Eighth Doctor, Paul McGann, returned for like a few minute special, and he regenerates into John Hurt. And John Hurt is kind of outside of the canon of the Doctors. He is known as the War Doctor. He is the one who actually fought in the Time War and is kind of shunned by the rest of the other Doctors for it. But he kind of redeems himself at the end of the 50th, of course. And then at the end of the 50th, John Hurt kind of regenerates into Christopher Eccleston, although you don't technically see Christopher Eccleston, you know? They just do a face morph thing. In fact, if I'm not mistaken, I read that he almost did actually come back. Yes, that was the original plan. And it speculated that he was busy filming Dark World. Yeah, we're not too sure what happened there, but the original plan was to bring back Christopher Eccleston. But I mean, if that's the case, wow, because that character in Dark World was so not worth the time he spent on it. No, but we had John Hurt, and that was arguably the last thing I ever saw John Hurt do. God rest him. Yeah. After the 50th, they had one more episode with Matt Smith, which is another weird episode. And that was where he gained his whole new regeneration cycle. And that's where he became Peter Capaldi, the angry Scotsman. Is there any other kind of Scotsman? But yeah. In media, at least. Yeah, it's true, actually. But yeah, people didn't really they liked Capaldi as the Doctor. They didn't necessarily like the stories he was in. And Capaldi's era is when it started to dip quite significantly. Yeah, I hear that the overall character arc for the Doctor is really good, but that the individual stories were just not up to snuff, and something about the moon being an egg, and there's a lot of really bad episodes, but there's some really good episodes as well. There's an episode in the Orient Express in space. That's not too bad. I think it's called Mummy on the Orient Express. That's actually really interesting. Check it out. But but what's interesting about Capaldi's era is that the Master came back as the Mistress. Or Missy, as she liked to be called. Yeah. And I know, the character itself, not that great. It kind of got irritating. But it introduced the idea of Time Lord's changing set, which is significant. Because then, in the last episode, Capaldi regenerates and he becomes Jodie Whittaker. I forgot to mention, I know Capaldi from a I don't know if it's really obscure, but it's one of those quirky 80s indie movies called Local Hero. Oh, right.
where he's a Scotsman. It's the one guy from Animal House goes to Scotland to try and buy land to dig for oil, and Capaldi is there as like his escort, basically. And he has a romance with this biologist woman who has webbed feet.
Interesting. Well, I mean, I personally knew Capaldi from a British comedy show called The Thick of It, which basically it's taking the piss out of UK politics.
So it wouldn't make any sense to me, anyways.
No, but he plays like this really rough and quite angry, again,
Scotsman
advisor to the Prime Minister. And he swears a lot. He is famous for his very inventive swearing. I mean, I think one of the last things I knew of him saying before he became the Doctor was telling someone that he would take his iPod out of his tiny nano sheath and push it up his cock. That's a Peter Capaldi quote.
That's great.
And I wish he said that to a Dalek. But anyway.
Yeah, but does a Dalek have a cock? That's probably too complicated to answer.
But anyway, but that's why it was weird, because Capaldi was very much he didn't really do anything for kids TV. He was very much a very mature actor, so it was so weird seeing him take over from Matt Smith, who was very much a children's TV show. And the show became very dark because of it, and very intense. A lot of dark themes, a lot of really creepy stuff, and stuff that was just weird. But I won't go into that. Anyway, Capaldi became Jodie Whittaker, which is very significant.
And in his regeneration, that Christmas special, they brought back the first Doctor, right?
Oh yeah, David Bradley played William Hartnell playing the first Doctor.
Yes, a.k.a. Filch from Harry Potter for us Americans.
Well, he played it really well, and very similar.
Well, actually, I should say my references are out of date, but I think most people now would know him for Game of Thrones.
Oh yeah, true. Yeah.
I haven't watched that.
No, but yeah, there's in the Christmas special where David Bradley is the first Doctor. They start off with footage from the Hartnell episode, and you've got Hartnell giving this speech, and they transform it into the modern film. And it's so identical, it's creepy, and it's so well done. I really do like that episode, to be honest. But anyway.
Jodie Whittaker.
Where
I actually have something worthwhile to say and not just bullshitting.
Yeah, because this is the show, this is when you started watching it.
Yeah, because we were talking about doing this episode, and this premiered while we were prepping it.
Yeah.
You can tell how long this has been in the works.
And to be honest, it was one of those things where, is this going to work? I hope it will. And it does. It's a fantastic show.
And the new showrunner is Chris Chibnall.
Yes, who's Broadchurch.
People don't seem to like his writing very much from what I've been reading.
Well, it's difficult to say because he has written some really good stuff. For example, he wrote the first 2 episodes of Life on Mars, the UK version, which is really, really good.
I've never seen that show.
Give the first episode a try.
Don't watch the American version?
No, the American version is shite. No offense to Americans, but it is shit.
Hey, at least we made a better version of The Office. And that's just, so many people are stopping the episode right there. Assuming they haven't stopped at the beginning of the history lesson.
Yeah, but what's interesting is that Life on Mars starred John Sim, who played the Master.
But no, you said it was a good jumping on point, so I jumped in, and that first episode was incredible.
Yeah, the first episode's fantastic. And it's shot in such a new and interesting way, and it looks so much better for it. But the show just looks so much sleeker now.
It looks it looks fairly cinematic.
Yeah, it really does.
And just from an aesthetic standpoint, the opening credits with that massive purple time vortex and the remixed theme music is really good.
The new theme music, which kind of has a modern twist on, I refer to it as John Pertwee's kind of theme. That kind of era of theme. It's like taking that and mixing it with the new, and it's really great. And yeah.
But to sort of quickly, because at the time we're recording this, there's going to be another episode out tomorrow, but the latest one is The Witchfinders.
Yeah, there's 2 episods left, I should say, of this series.
Oh, only 2? Wow, that's short. Yeah. I was expecting a few more at least.
It's the BBC. They stretch out 3 episodes into an entire series.
But no, I was thinking it was going to be 13 for some reason.
That would have been good, but no.
But so okay, this is going to be the same length as Preacher Season 3. Good TV here.
Yeah.
But I mean, just regular the episodes. The premiere was incredible.
Yeah.
The Ghost Monument was pretty decent. It had a few rough spots, but it was a fun watch.
I liked the Ghost Monument. That was an interesting one because it was... Well, I liked it because it was different. Because the way the companions tagged along, they tagged along by accident, which is how they used to do it in old Who.
Yeah,
not
that was
necessarily
great.
New.
I thought that was great how that happened.
Yeah, because the companions they tagged along by accident, and then they decided to just stay, which is the way it should be, rather than just right off the bat. Do you want to join me?
Because they got the taste for the
exactly,
for
and I think that's a better way of doing it.
But that was good. Rosa was a good episode because it dealt with kind of an on the nose choice for a historical subplot.
Yeah, with Rosa Parks and the bus and all that stuff.
But it actually worked out really well.
Yeah, for the most part, it was a good episode. The villain, not so much, but
the villain was a little lackluster. I'm like, okay, so all you need to time travel in the Doctor Who universe is a little wristwatch.
Well, that was established before.
Okay, I didn't know that.
Yeah, the time agents have been established before because Jack Harkness is a time agent.
Let's not get into that.
We're not going to get into him and how he can't die and all that crap.
We're not going to get into Torchwood because it would just be me. It would be you going on, and I would occasionally make a joke about him being on Arrow.
Pretty much.
Referencing the Megalodon movie he was in.
But the time agent wristwatch thing has been established, so that wasn't out of nowhere.
And then the next episode, I really wanted to like this because the premise was really fun, and it was arachnids in the UK with the giant mutated spiders run amok, and it just fizzled out. And
it was an alright episode for the most part, but the ending just kind of went bleh.
The comedy,
ironically, like the spiders did.
But like the comedy and the whole, if you can really call it social commentary they were doing with Chris Knopf and that, it just didn't land. Yeah,
it wasn't a great episode.
And the ending where he shoots the giant spider, and she's all like, it's like, we should have done something more humane. I'm like, you just established it was suffocating to death.
Yeah, it's weird.
And it was really weird. And the other problem being it's really difficult to empathize with a spider.
That's true.
The spiders have been running around killing people this whole episode.
Yeah, just burn them, kill them with fire. I don't care.
You turned Sheffield into Australia for like an episode.
Yeah.
But they followed that up with the Saranga Conundrum, which is an episode which people don't seem to like it, but I feel like I really liked it. I think people just didn't get the joke.
Yeah.
It's Alien, but with a ridiculous, cute little scaly Furby.
Yeah, it's like the cutest thing on the planet that just eats everything.
And it eats the sonic screwdriver. Like, it ate my Sonic.
Yeah. And I liked the episode, and I think I mentioned it before. The Doctor has this fantastic speech about human technology that just shows her love for the human race, which was great. And it really showed the humanity of that. I like that.
And it had a really fun cold open where she went to the wrong garbage planet.
Oh, yeah, the garbage planet, and they find a mine.
And following that was Demons of the Punjab, which was a great historical episode, which I knew a fair amount about the partitioning of India, but it was cool seeing it sort of, the way they sort of mixed that in with the character stuff and just really made it just a good story.
Yeah. I mean, and it was kind of like, it was very similar to the Rosa Parks episode.
It was like that, but they did it even better.
Yeah, because the villains weren't villains at all.
Yeah, they handled those guys really well, because you think they're one thing, but then they're another. And what it turned out they actually were was actually really intriguing and interesting.
Yeah, really interesting characters. I like that. To be honest, that character has been done before. In Capaldi's last episode, there's a similar alien with a similar, which is what people complained about with those guys. So I can understand that. But for the most part, it was a good episode.
And then they followed that up with Kerblam.
Kerblam was just classic Doctor Who.
It was a fun, interesting sort of social commentary on stuff like Amazon. And the robots were giving me like BioShock vibes.
Yeah. What was really interesting about that as well is that Lee Mack is a really famous British comedian. He does a lot of stand-up and he's in a lot of panel shows. He's a very funny guy. But he's barely in that episode. He gets killed after like 10 minutes. Spoilers.
Oh, was he the guy who just wandered off by himself?
Yeah.
He was talking with Yaz?
Yeah, and I was like really excited to see him in an episode because he's really funny and great. But he just shows up and then dies. So stupid.
And then the twists in that episode were pretty good too.
Yes, it's Doctor Who making you fear everyday objects like statues and bubble wrap.
Yeah, the bubble wrap was amazing. That was so good. That was just a great idea. And then that was followed up by The Witchfinders, which that episode felt like a weird ass drug trip to me. But I will give it, the one thing I will definitely give it credit for is that it's rare that you see a semi-historically accurate take on witch hunts.
Especially in the UK.
Yeah, because there was no witch burning, and it was led by, because like most witch hunts in actual history, it was led by the secular authorities. So I'm like, oh, okay, they actually kind of got this right. And Alan Cumming was hysterically funny.
As King James, yeah.
Because I didn't know he was going to be in. I knew King James was going to be in because the episode description on Amazon gave that away.
Yeah.
But I didn't know it was going to be Alan Cumming, and his whole performance was just...
It was hilarious.
It was weird, but it was so funny.
And Graham, one of the companions, has my favourite line in that, where he says, he tells King James to behave, or we shall strike down upon you with furious anger. And King James goes, Ezekiel. And Graham just goes, Tarantino. I love that line.
And Graham, and just wearing that huge hat.
Yeah. And that was a great episode because it's the first episode to highlight the fact that because the Doctor's now a woman, she's not as respected as being a man.
Yeah, then especially in that historical context.
Yeah, and it actually worked. It wasn't heavy-handed. It made sense. The fact that she was a woman meant that she was basically disregarded as being useless.
Yeah, and she probably one of my favorite jokes in that episode because it was relatively subtle. So it took a bit to sink in, but she says, "I'm not buying that," and then King James goes, "Why does the lassie speak of commerce?"
Yeah, there's a good stuff.
and the fact that he was very clearly into Ryan.
Oh yeah, he was all up for that.
It's like, oh, my Nubian prince. You get a guy to play some weird character like that. You can't do much better than Nightcrawler.
Yeah, it was a good episode. The aliens felt a little bit tacked on.
They were weird because I had no clue what was going to happen, and then zombies
basically
locked in by a tree.
Zombies, and then it was basically alien mud, and then it was they're actually aliens inhabiting the mud that have been trapped in the hill for centuries.
And I'm like, I hope someone doesn't come along in the next few centuries and chop that tree down.
Yeah, which is what exactly happened.
Yeah, because I mean, in the future, you better Dr. Bear keep an eye on that tree for the time being.
So yeah, that was last week's episode, and we got 2 more episodes, and then there's a New Year's special because they're not doing a Christmas special anymore. Well, no, actually, I agree with them when they said that they've pretty much done everything to do with Christmas.
Oh, okay, that's what.
So that they can't really link it to Christmas, so they're not even going to bother. They'll just make it a New Year's special instead.
Well, what are they going to do on New Year's? Have the Doctor get drunk and watch the ball drop?
I have no idea. But people are losing their shit over the fact that she's wearing a rainbow scarf. Who cares?
I don't care.
But people are going mental. She's wearing a rainbow scarf and they're like, oh, what does it mean? Is she going to come out as gay? No, of course she's not. Sexuality has never been part of the Doctor's MO. They've never mentioned it, so why would they start now? It's just enjoy it for what it is.
Well, slightly with Paul McGann.
Yeah, that's a whole other stuff we can talk about other days. But my point is that it's just a scarf and people are losing their shit over it. And it's so irritating. Stop reading too much into it.
I mean, and the Doctor's an alien, so that wouldn't even be gay anyways. It would be...
Plus the fact that, right, when you look at it, right...
Xenosexual?
Yeah, well, when you look at it, right, the Doctor has been a man, the Doctor has married a woman. She is still married to that woman. Why does it change anything? That's just the way it is.
That is that just the mental gymnastics. Just thinking about that is just a little bit weird to me.
Yeah, well, my point is that you don't need to think about it. Just accept it for what it is and move the fuck on. Yeah, it's no big deal.
And I will say, her performance, even in the lesser moments of the episode so far, Jodie Whittaker has never been anything less than great. Like, she just has that great energy to her performance, and she has just like this great joy she brings to the character over the most mundane of things.
Yeah, she's so happy to see things, and just like the Kablam man.
Yeah, the Kablam man. I love the Kablam man.
Which is such a contrast to Capaldi. He was like, so cheer up for God's sake.
Sour.
Yeah, he really was.
How Scottish he was.
So yeah, but I'm loving the new direction of the show. I hope it continues. People are saying that the ratings are in a downward spiral. They are not. That's a myth.
Every show has its ratings in a downward spiral at some point.
I know. I think it's just people hoping they're in a downward spiral.
That's, of course, I've had to deal with the downward spiral this year with Preacher.
Exactly. Yeah, it's just a thing that happens. But it's got another series, so shut up.
And it's not like it's Constantine here, where the show never had ratings.
Exactly. So, yeah. But I'm not going to talk anymore about that controversy because people are idiots.
Yeah, but no, I know. I think she's great, and she's the best thing of it. Her and Graham are the two best things about the show.
Yes. And I love the fact that he just calls her Doc.
Like he adjusted the best out of all three of the companions. He's just like, it's weird, whatever.
He's along for the ride and just enjoying what happens. He doesn't care.
And so, yeah, that's the whole series.
Yeah, that's pretty much the entire series. If any of that sounds vaguely interesting, chances are you'll enjoy the show. And what's great about Doctor Who is that if you don't like one particular Doctor, just wait till the next one and it'll be a completely different show again. Because it keeps it like the Doctor herself, it regenerates and changes.
Just wait, yeah, maybe one day it'll regenerate as a French Doctor.
Well, I mean, I have no problem with the Doctor regenerating into something that other than a human.
Yeah, it would be interesting. Regenerate as a Gorn, complete with the same suit from the 60s Trek show.
Because I don't see why the Doctor needs to be humanoid, frankly.
Unless that's just what Gallifreyans always are.
I mean, that they have always been. We thought the Doctor was always going to be a man.
Which, by the way, we're going to have to talk about the whole man-woman thing in terms of this script because, dear God.
Oh, yeah.
There's a moment at the beginning of this.
Oh, yeah. Well, it's quite ironic, considering.
So, yeah, I guess we can jump into the script now.
Finally.
To give a little bit of background on the script, basically, I'm quoting from this book, The Nth Doctor, is that in 86, when the hiatus happened, Lytton and Dugdale, who were like the producers of this, and they came up with the bare-bones basic story. They were effects guys who had worked on a bunch of different things for the BBC, including Doctor Who, and they got the great idea to make a movie. Because they figured, okay, it's about time we sort of push Doctor Who, to a more international audience or something like that. And the business arm of the BBC asked for a ridiculous amount of money, and so they formed a consortium, or a group, which had all these different names, including Dalton Rays, Coast to Coast, Green something over the years. But they talked to a bunch of people, including members of Dire Straits, and they raised the money, and got the film rights, but they didn't get the merchandising or the TV rights or anything, which caused problems later. And so they got Mark Ezra to write a script, which was called The Return of Varnax or something. Okay, I'm going to mention a bunch of different script names because this book basically invented names for the different scripts because most of them were just called Doctor Who or Doctor Who the Movie. Yeah. Just to differentiate them all. Yeah. And he wrote a script, and the premise of that is similar to the premise we have and the one we're going to talk about. But in that version, it was Varnax was a renegade Time Lord. I can't remember if he was actually a Gallifreyan Time Lord or not, but he was basically like Space Hitler, and he had this army. He was going to go out and conquer the universe, but he got exiled to this planet, and so he needs to find the transport crystals, get his army out of there. And so the Doctor basically has to stop him. The Dalton Rays people, they were fine with the script, but they figured that they would have an easier job selling it if a more known writer wrote it. So they got Johnny Byrne, who had worked on Doctor Who, and he had showrun some other shows, to rewrite the script. And that's more or less the version we're talking about now. It went through multiple different variations, and I'll talk about some of those later when we're done. So they brought him in to try and write for it. And the ones he wrote, I believe if I'm remembering this correctly, were The Keeper of Traken, Arc of Infinity, and Monsters of the Deep.
Right, okay. I know those.
And what are your thoughts on those? Because I know, based on what I've read on the subreddit, he's considered one of the worst of classic Who writers.
Yeah, well, the episodes themselves are nothing special. I don't know them off the top of my head, but what was the other one? The Deep one? What was that called again?
Creatures or Monsters from the Deep, I think.
Yeah, I think that was the Sea Devils, which is another recurring villain.
Yeah, they're apparently not considered particularly good.
No, the Sea Devils are not that great. They're kind of the Sea Devils and the Silurians. The Silurians came back for New Who. But
based on what it was the Sea Devils and the Silurians were both in it. And what I read on the wiki is that apparently the script had tons of continuity issues, which they tried to iron out in the middle of production.
Oh, God. That never goes well.
But apparently Keeper of Traken, people don't mind. It's Keeper of Traken, Arc of Infinity, and Warriors of the Deep.
That sounds about right. I think, if I remember correctly, Warriors of the Deep has one of the worst creatures ever made.
And that's saying something for Classic Who.
Yeah. One of the longest running jokes for Classic Who is, if you make a Halloween costume of anything from Classic Who, you're working with a higher budget than they did.
Okay, oh, okay, here's the other TV shows he worked on. He was a story editor of Space 1999.
Oh, okay. Yeah.
He was a script consultant on All Creatures Great and Small.
That's appropriate.
And he created the successful ITV series Heart.
Oh, yes. Heartbeat. That's police procedural in the 70s.
But yeah, so he was brought in and he rewrote it, and he basically, a lot of like the character stuff, like, I'll have to bring in certain elements that were mentioned about the Mark Ezra script, but he basically brought in the whole new idea of the immortality and Varnax and the Doctor having a personal history. And
even though the characters in this script have never been mentioned before, ever.
Yes, and apparently, like, the Doctor wasn't given much of a history anyways prior to the show.
Yeah, I mean, the big thing about the Doctor is that we don't know much about him.
Which is why he's Doctor Who?
Exactly. And when it came to Sylvester McCoy, there was this huge plan to explore who he was. Like, there was ideas of him being Merlin at one point.
I actually wouldn't mind seeing that.
I mean, there's a whole episode where he has, like, it's like sword and sorcery kind of thing, where Morgana shows up with, what the hell's his name? The bad guy.
Mordred?
Mordred is in it.
I know my Arthur.
Yeah, it's Mordred and his mother. And they fight the Doctor, and they consider the Doctor Merlin. Now, it's from what I remember of the episode, it's ambiguous of whether the Doctor was Merlin or will be Merlin in the future. Okay. It's a bit confusing, but the episode's really good. And
well, as long as he's not drunk ass Merlin from Transformers 5, we're good.
Yeah, and it's a good episode with the Brigadier, who was Unit, Brigadier Lethbridge Stewart, who was a recurring character from the Unit days.
Who pops up in this script? In a very weird cameo.
Hence why I mentioned it. And it's so throwaway in the script, though.
Yeah, it is. And it's one of those things where apparently in the Mark Ezra script he played a more significant role, but that kind of got scaled back, and eventually they just cut him out because, like, some of the drafts actually took place more in America than in England, and they had to bounce back and forth as to, like, who the human companion is. Like, he changed a bunch of different times. But no, so we're going to be looking at a script by Johnny Byrne titled just Doctor Who, the movie. And it reads like it's part of that series of scripts he wrote, which the book refers to as The Time Lord. And it fits in story-wise amongst all those ideas. Now, the weird thing is that this specific draft is not mentioned at all.
Yeah, that was something I found in my research as well.
And the weird thing about it is that this whole phase of the project would have been around 88, 89. But I found a separate copy of this exact draft with a date on it that said, like, April 1992, which A, is weird because that's my birth month. And B, it's like, that's kind of late. So I'm guessing this is like I guess Dalton Ray's kept this on file or something, and maybe they went back to it and started tweaking it or something at one point. It's very strange.
It is weird.
So yeah, that's a big question mark in terms of when this script actually falls in the timeline.
Yeah, I wish we had a more clear timeline of when, because, like I said, it feels like it was written before the show got cancelled.
Yes, or this version would have been after cancellation because they wrote in that origin story for the TARDIS. Yeah,
of course. But I just mean it feels like that,
Yeah, but the whole Varnax thing, it starts before cancellation because they started in 86, 87.
Right, yeah.
And when the show got canceled, they worked in the whole TARDIS origin because they thought people would need an explanation for why it looks like a phone booth, basically.
I don't think that's an origin,
Well, the origin for why it looks like that.
No, I just mean because in the script, it looks like a police box. He takes off. It starts to change back, and then it breaks. However, somebody says, "Has it broken again?"
Yes, Cora does say that.
So I don't think it's supposed to be an origin of that. I think it's just he's fixed it, but it broke again.
Yes, that's the idea, but they're showing that because they need to explain to
sorry, yeah. That they're explaining that why, but I thought you meant as the origin for that shell.
Well, it kind of, because they kept doing that across the different versions. So yeah, okay, let's get into this. This script has the weirdest 10 pages, first 10 pages. Yeah. This was just like, I remember reading this just being like, what the fuck is going on the first time I pulled this out. But to look at my notes, now I read this a while ago, so you've read it more recently, so you'll have to kind of fill me in. So, okay, it opens in London in 1932. And we see this strange fellow wandering around. He's stalking a prostitute. And it doesn't actually say this within the dialogue. It says this within the scene description, which just makes it bad film storytelling.
Yeah, it literally just says, 45 years ago, he preyed on this East End district of London under the name of Jack the Ripper.
So yes, it's Jack the Ripper still alive in the 1930s, which we have to fucking comprehend that.
I mean, that makes no sense, because there's no actual explanation for that. Why the jump in time?
And I have a theory about that, which I'll talk about in a second.
Fair enough.
But okay, so he's following this prostitute, right? The prostitute turns around, and it's the doctor in a dress and a wig. I'm like, somebody just before writing this, they saw the Stallone movie Nighthawks, which starts with him catching a mugger by dressing as an old woman.
Yeah. Although, one thing I should say, when the doctor is introduced in this script, it has a little tidbit about him. And I'll just read what it says. It says, a maverick Time Lord from the planet of Gallifrey, the home of a super-intelligent elite who like to think they have the sole monopoly on time travel. Now, my problem with that is they don't think that, because there are many races who can time travel and they don't stop them. That's not true. So that was the first thing that jumped out at me as kind of incorrect.
Yeah, and also I don't like the fact that they're explaining all this stuff in the scene directions, which is not going to help the audience at all.
No.
This is supposed to be introducing the Doctor to.
Yeah, it's a bit weird.
And also I should mention Nighthawk's book ends with Stallone in drag, because he kills Rutger Hauer at the end, who's going after Stallone's ex-wife, only she turns around and it's Stallone in a wig.
Right, okay.
That's actually not a bad movie, but that's weird. But okay, so he he calls Jack the Ripper Weasel, and he says something about him being a plasmoid, and then he freak out with like a magic flashlight.
Yeah, and I looked it up. Plasmoid is again made up for this script. Nothing in the canon.
Oh, okay, interesting.
Nothing I could find anyway.
Yeah, it turns into like a little orange Shoggoth thingy.
Yeah.
And then he steps on it and squashes it like a bug.
Which is something the Doctor would never do.
Yeah, and I think he makes a pun about it too.
Yeah, it's Pop Goes the Weasel, he says.
Oh.
Which is so terrible.
And okay, all this stuff is weird and random. In one of the other drafts that's mentioned in the book, Weasel is one of Varnax's minions who has one of the MacGuffins that they need to collect, and so that scene happens later. And it actually happens during the Victorian time period.
Right. Interesting. Okay.
Because throughout the different drafts that I was reading about in that book, it's mentioned that there's almost always a Victorian scene, and they started inserting like a 1930s or 1940s sequence to explain why the TARDIS looks like a police box.
Yeah.
And so it reads like in this version, they just kind of mashed those two ideas together.
And not very well.
Yeah, and in the Mark Ezra version, apparently instead of Jack the Ripper, they do something with the Tower of London and one of the crown jewels being one of the crystals or whatever. Right. And the Doctor shows up and says he's Sherlock Holmes, who apparently in the Doctor Who universe is a real person.
Okay.
According to the footnotes, that's implied somewhere in Who canon.
Not that I'm aware, but okay.
But this person wrote like the official episode guide, so... And which I should mention, this book has this annoying habit of talking about all the different drafts and trying to reconcile them not only with Who canon, but with each other, and trying to make them all canon simultaneously.
Which is ludicrous.
Which just gave me this huge headache. I'm like, oh god, they all contradict each other.
Yeah, I mean, that's just a fool's errand, frankly.
And okay, so the police, show up and they're like, hey you, they start chasing the Doctor, and he jumps into his TARDIS, which is disguised as a police box, and while he's escaping, and you see it takes off, starts to sort of change into its original form, but then...
You missed the joke.
What's the joke?
He jumps into the police box, and it's a real police box. So he has to jump out of that one and jump into the TARDIS.
Oh, there's a terrible joke about that later.
Yeah.
About the whole police box thing, but no, as he's taking off the chameleon circuit, which allows it to take other shapes, I guess that's what that is. It breaks,
yeah, that's
fucks it up again.
I mean, the chameleon circuit is a weird thing because it's been broke from the very beginning. Then Colin Baker's Doctor fixed it. There was a time where the TARDIS actually looked like a piano organ, for example. That was one of its shapes.
Huh.
And the Master's TARDIS always looks like a Doric column, like a stone column, which is weird. It just doesn't look right to me. But
some of the other versions of this, like moving on into when they tried to bring it back to TV, they would show what's supposed to be the default form of the TARDIS, and it's like a pyramid or something. Oh
well, the default TARDIS shape that's kind of become canon now is just a formless cylinder.
Okay, so that must have been a New Who thing then.
Yeah, well, I think it's... I'm not sure, actually, but... oh, that's right, because in Patrick Troughton we see TARDISes, or TARDISes, whatever, as kind of just, featureless boxes, so it's hard to say. But I think New Who has kind of cemented them in the canon as like these formless cylinders now.
Well, this book was written before New Who.
Oh, yeah. I'm not saying that the script's wrong or anything, I'm just saying. But that's what they look like now, and they have different... the chameleon circuit is what keeps them. But like I said, it got fixed for Colin Baker, but we don't know if it's fixed anymore, but I guess she just likes it the way it is, and they keep it as the police box. Although it does change slightly, and it has actually gotten bigger over time. Yeah, well, because in the Christmas special, they had Peter Capaldi's TARDIS and William Hartnell's TARDIS, or David Bradley's TARDIS, and next to each other, Capaldi's is much bigger. Now,
okay. Let's dial it back.
Yeah, sorry, but
let's get back to the script. Let's not get too nerdy here.
No, I just wanted to say that it was actually made canon that over time TARDISes grow.
Oh, interesting.
So they explain.
But okay, so he gets a holovid call from Cora, who's a Gallifreyan communications expert, and she's like his niece or his cousin or something.
I couldn't see anything about that.
He brings it up that like, oh, she might be related to me or something, and so she's like weirdly attached to him. It's not really explained.
If there is a mention of her being related, then that's really bad, because that's just something you don't do anymore.
Oh, really?
Yeah, I mean, because we've mentioned he has a granddaughter. He technically has a daughter. Well, that's a weird episode we don't talk about.
Okay, I'll take your word for it.
And yeah, we don't really talk about his family. That's not. It's kind of like one of those weird subjects. Like I mentioned about the removing of the name. It's like he's been erased from history in a way. So he is just the Doctor. He doesn't have a family or a name. He's just the Doctor.
But would that have been outside the pale for when this was written?
Hard to say. That's why it's a bit difficult to say, really.
Okay, but like I mean, it's like a real quick mention where he goes, "Oh, I think she's my niece from like several times removed or something like that," but I'm not really sure.
Yeah, I'm not sure. I mean, I can't see it, but I'll take your word for it.
Yeah, I think it was there, but also there's a one of the other drafts one I mentioned where Weasel was the minion of Varnax, and that scene happens later in the movie. She's already traveling with him, and when he pops into the TARDIS, he's still in a dress, and she goes, "Oh, for a moment I thought you had regenerated as a female." And then the Doctor replies with, "Let's discuss my nightmares some other time."
Ooh. Controversial.
I got a good laugh out of reading that in the book. I was like,
wow.
Okay, she tells him that somebody called Ganji has what he's looking for, leading him to the planet Deimos. And he's at the Palace of Profit, and he's basically acting like a pit boss of some kind in this casino called this
Palace of Profit.
Palace of Profit, which is in the city of Rakets.
Yeah. And and I got to be honest here. This is where the script lost me, because there's so many names thrown at you all at once. It's crazy.
Yes, it
literally goes the Palace of Prophets, Dwellers, Aliens, Nymphid, Gonji. Who else? Pog, the Demonoxictic.
And most of it doesn't really matter.
No, and none of it matters. But they just throw these names at you that just don't mean anything.
And also, what's interesting is that in some of the drafts, Deimos and Rakets were two different planets.
Yeah.
So that got changed. And Ganji, well, we finally get a little bit more about him, and he actually starts kind of developing as a character, which is very late in this thing, to be honest. He's actually one of the better characters.
Oh, I would say he is definitely, arguably, the closest a companion would be. Because he has the most well-rounded character, but...
he also has a tendency to hack limbs off of people.
I was just about to say, I don't think he would be as violent if he was an actual companion. Which is good, because technically they don't make him a companion.
Yeah, they don't really make anybody companions, so to speak.
No, they kind of jettisoned that idea. Unless you count the human. But
they sort of do, because... But it's kind of something that doesn't really take hold until the end.
Yeah, pretty much.
And so, but there's this talk about how, like, the planet's natives are the dwellers, and there was some sort of, like, cataclysm, and now they've been pushed aside by these alien species, and it's just like, it's like this big, like, smorgasbord of all these different aliens wandering around. It's like the troll market crossed with that casino planet from The Last Jedi.
I was going to say the troll market from Hellboy. It very much felt like that.
Which I just courted controversy just by neutrally mentioning Last Jedi, but... But so, okay, they take care of some unruly customers at the palace, and Ganji takes the Doctor to Mother Kajaje's auction house, where there's a time rotor being auctioned off.
I was pronouncing it Kayage, but never mind.
I don't think there is an official pronunciation.
No, probably not.
Kahage.
Although, I found it weird that I couldn't help pronouncing the auctioneer as the fecal.
I did not write down the auctioneer's name.
Yeah, it's Feqal, and I can only read that as fecal.
Fecal? Yeah, well, it works for me with my sense of humor.
Oh, God.
He's just a walking turd.
Yeah, again, just too many names. It's ridiculous.
He's like the shit demon from Dogma.
Pretty much, yeah. But yeah, there's, like I said, there's a lot of names going on, and it's just overwhelming.
Now,
crap.
the time rotor, it takes a while for them to explain this, but it's apparently the thing that makes the TARDIS a TARDIS.
Yes. That's the central column in the TARDIS.
But here it's like a small thing you can put in your pocket.
Which makes no sense.
So they changed that up. So it's that giant thrusting crystal thing in Jodie Whittaker's TARDIS.
Yeah. Well, to be honest, I'm not too sure. I think it's, from what I remember, the thing that moves or lights up in the center column of the TARDIS is known as the time rotor. They might have checked, because there is in fact the Master John Pertwee episode. He takes a tiny component from the Master's TARDIS, so it can't fly. So they might be confusing it for that. I can't remember what it's called, but it's not a time rotor.
Okay, so there's so much going on in just this first couple of moments. I mean, and this is after the Doctor and Drag fighting alien Shoggoth Jack the Ripper in 1932.
Yeah.
Like, this is right after that.
And I would say as well, the reason why I don't think, personally, this script it's pretty bad. But it's because for like the majority of the script, at least the first half, there's no humans. So there's nothing for the audience to latch onto. Just think, if this came out as a movie for people who have never seen Doctor Who, and everyone's an alien and it takes place on alien worlds with bizarre names and places you've never heard of, how alienating, ironically, would that be for you?
You need your Star-Lord.
Yeah, you do need that kind of character to explain things too, because we just learn stuff and we don't know what's going on.
Although he's technically an alien, but
well, yeah,
fuck it, that's a different conversation. Because Kurt Russell is more than man, and we all know it. But okay, so Mother blah 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 insists that the auction go ahead because the Doctor can't just go, hey, give that shit to me. Surprisingly passive.
Well, that's not unheard of.
Yeah, but it's weird that he just kind of is like, okay, and he doesn't really seem to bid on it either.
No, I think I'm not too sure what's going on really. It's like you said, it is passive to the point of not giving a shit.
But no, so this mysterious cloaked figure buys it, and it hurries off and it contacts this ship called the Creator, and the people aboard it, it's a woman named Zilla and this unseen guy called Varnax, and basically they're all like physically fucked up and they need exoskeletons to live, basically.
Yeah, they have like life support units and stuff, don't they?
And we find out more about this, but Zilla's the least fucked up, but the Doctor, they catch up to the figure who sheds the cloak, revealing himself to be someone called Neglos, whom the Doctor recognizes, but we have no real knowledge of him. The script is just like assuming you know what's going on in it. Which
is weird, because these characters have never ever been in Doctor Who, ever. It's just not a thing. These characters are completely new to this, and it just expects you to understand the situation. It's bizarre.
And my first assumption before I researched this is like, is this somebody? Am I supposed to know who this is?
Yeah, I mean, that's the impression it gives, but I'm really never heard of any of these characters.
Now, I want to say this now before I forget, but it seems like every other version of this starts off with the flashback explaining about what happened to Varnax, what happened with the Doctor, what happened to them. Like, there was this whole, like, what the significance of, like, what he was doing was. Like, there's this whole setup for that at the beginning.
Oh, sorry to take the... I forgot what I was just going to say. I just did a little bit of quick research just to check, because I wanted to make sure if any of these characters have shown up before. And Varnax comes up, unbelievably.
Interesting.
And it specifically says here, right? Varnax was an individual who attacked Gallifrey sometime before its destruction in the war against the enemy. in the prose The Gallifrey Chronicles. The Time Lords knew Varnax was a threat. They were destined to survive. The references to Varnax are references to the unmade movie in the 1990s, which featured Varnax's attack on Gallifrey.
Although what's weird is that this doesn't have an attack on Gallifrey.
No, it's weird. They just seem to have taken the name.
Yeah, and, well, he does attack Gallifrey in the Mark Ezra version, I think.
Oh, right, okay.
But no, there was this whole... It started with, setting up who Varnax and all these people were and what the Doctor's relationship with him was.
Yeah.
But it just seems like for this version, they just went, fuck it, we're opening with just like a big action hook.
Yeah, I think it kind of feels like they went for the Star Wars approach, where they just said, fuck it, we don't need to explain anything.
But the reason that works... I touched my mic, I don't know if you heard that. But the reason that works for Star Wars is because it's literally the simplest conflict imaginable.
Exactly. But in this case, it is not simple at all.
But, I mean, Guardians of the Galaxy has that problem a little bit, because it just throws you into this whole Xandar Kree war thing that it doesn't even remotely begin to explain.
Yeah, true.
But then again, that movie's a comedy, so...
Yeah, exactly. It's just a bit weird.
And also, the fact that the woman is named Zilla... This is going to get hilarious considering some of the scenes between her and the Doctor, but that just makes me think of the Roland Emmerich Godzilla, which was, for one of the later movies, it was retrofitted into a different monster called Zilla.
Right, yeah.
So just imagining her with that massive lizard chin face.
Well, for some reason, I imagined lizard people, and I don't know where I got that from.
Yeah, that's very strange.
Anyway.
We're psychically connected. And so they fight for a bit, and then the Creator arrives and just extracts Neglos, and then the Doctor recognizes the ship. He goes, oh, Varnax must be involved. We still don't know who he is.
Yeah.
And Ganji offers to go along with the Doctor. He's like, hey, Varnax fucked up my planet here, and so I'm going with you. And this is when we see Varnax on board the Creator, and it's like his body is like all shriveled up, and it's hooked up to this massive exoskeleton. Almost reminding me a little bit of Full Metal Alchemist. A little bit, if you know what all I'm talking about. Hello?
Sorry.
You blanked on me there.
Yeah, sorry. That my headphones went off. Sorry. Carry on.
But I was gonna say, like, he's in like this massive exoskeleton that's bigger than his own body almost.
Yeah.
And it reminded me of what's the character's name from Full Metal Alchemist who's living inside that suit of armor?
I've not seen that.
Oh yeah, well I've seen like 3 episodes of it, but like the one brother is like just a spirit inside a suit of armor.
Right, okay.
But it reminded me of that. But so Varnax, he takes the Time Rotor, plugs it into the console, and then it turns into a TARDIS, and Varnax like, we now have power over time, and he orders a course to be set for the crystals, and they enter a hole into the 4th dimension.
Which is so weird, because they make such a big deal about traveling through time tunnels, and it's just not how it's ever been depicted in the show.
Oh, interesting.
Well, no, because the TARDIS disappears and reappears somewhere else. That's literally it. I mean, the only time we actually see the time tunnel is in the opening credit.
And now that's just making me think of the time travel in Bill and Ted.
Yeah, I mean, and they kind of brought that back not brought it back, but they, in one of the more recent episodes with Jodie Whittaker, there's a scene where the TARDIS is flying through different tunnels.
Yeah, I was going to say I saw that. It's
never really been depicted like that. It's just been, it travels through this nebulous void, and it's not really a case of, you can't crash into things as the script depicts.
Yeah, we'll get to that.
I mean, there is things where, things are being outrun and they have to chase things through this, but it's depicted very weirdly in the script, to be honest.
But, okay, so they head back to the TARDIS, and it's already the aliens are already trying to auction it off, which I thought was pretty funny.
Oh, yeah.
And also, during the whole auction scene, there's a bunch of different references, including, like, a wrecked Dalek and a wrecked Cyberman.
It actually says there's a wrecked K9, which is sacrilege.
You like K9, don't you?
No, it's not that I like K9, but I know the fact that the Doctor would never allow that. That's ludicrous.
K9 is the robot dog, by the way.
The K9 was a robot dog.
Which actually played a role in certain other scripts.
Right, okay. But yeah, so it's just weird that the script would say, oh, there's a dead K9 here. It's like, no. K9 was literally like a companion. He was the exact same as a companion. There's no way they would allow that.
Yeah, that is, yeah, when you say that, it's very strange. And okay, So they leave Deimos. They're unable to track the Creator as the rotor in use is old and its energy signatures have been wiped from the database. I'm like, wow, these guys suck.
Yeah, that makes no sense.
They suck at their own technology. And so they contact the Lord President of the High Council of Time Lords, and they tell him Varnax is alive and has a time router. Why did I just turn English?
But yeah, it's very non-specific on what the Lord President is, because it's not Rassilon, because he would be a lot crazier. And in fact, in some of the continuity, especially for around this time, Romana, who was a Time Lord that traveled with Tom Baker, actually becomes Lord President. Romana 1, 2, and 3 are all Lord President.
Interesting.
So technically, you could argue that this Lord President would be Romana, but he's referred to as a man, which is weird.
All right, and so he orders the Doctor back to Gallifrey to attend the council, which is in permanent meeting, which I don't know how that works.
Yeah, they do that.
And so they arrive on Gallifrey, they park it in the middle of the open court, and there's a brief run-in with the court warden who's being an asshole.
Yeah, and that's when Cora appears, isn't it?
Yes, Cora appears. She's like, I found a way to track the creator, and she insists on going along with the Doctor when he leaves.
Although, can I just say, another bit in the script I was like, wait, what? The librarian keeps telling Cora to return a book.
Yes, that ends up being important later.
Yeah, and the book is Davros's Synchronodular Patterns. There is no way Gallifrey would have a book by Davros.
I didn't know who Davros was when I read this first, so good thing you noticed that.
It's a bit weird.
So she's basically reading the Mein Kampf of the
basically, yeah.
Although it's probably more coherent than Mein Kampf, sadly. Yeah. But they get to see the Doctor, they leave, and so the High Council is shown, and we learned that Varnax, Zilla, and Neglos were ordered destroyed by the Doctor. They basically said what he's doing with this immortality thing, which we find out that's what he's doing later. He's searching for true immortality, not regeneration, you ain't gonna die.
Which, again, is weird, because they've actually done that in the show.
Yo, you're gonna be the princes of the universe, born to be kings.
Kind of.
Throwing a bone to the Highlander fans.
Yeah.
They need it after the Source.
It's just the fact that they're, in the show, Captain Jack becomes immortal. So I thought that was significant because it's exactly how it's depicted in the script.
But what's weird about it is that we don't find out what he did. He was ordered to do this. We don't know what he did to these three people to make them weird, fucked up things. We don't know why we don't know how they got away. Because apparently the Doctor is just shit and doesn't know how to do the double tap.
Yeah.
Fucking check the wreckage. Make sure they're dead. Dumb shit. It's so weird. And apparently most of the other drafts did explain that, but we got the weird one where they cut all that back.
Yeah, it does feel like there's a lot of explanation just cut out.
And also the council is a lot friendlier to him in this draft, because apparently in the other ones, he went and stopped them of his own volition.
Yeah.
And the council went, fuck you, you're interfering.
Which actually is more accurate, because that's how the council usually act. Oops.
Yeah, they went, you'd think the guy who's going to destroy a planet is interfering more than the guy who stops him.
Yeah.
But no, there's various things, or they exiled him, or they wiped his memory, or they grounded him, and he had to steal a TARDIS to get away.
Like I said, I don't know any of this, so...
Yeah, it's very strange. You don't really need to know any of it. Okay, so... They were supposed to... Okay, so basically they catch up to speed on what Varnax is doing. He's searching for diffusion crystals, which were scattered through time by the Council. They don't know where they are, though.
Oh, I wonder where one is. I literally said that when reading the script.
Oh, you figured it out?
Obviously he was going to go back to Earth. Come on.
Yeah, there's a moment where they don't know what planet he's going to destroy, and I'm like, it's going to be Earth or it's going to be Gallifrey.
Yeah, I mean, that was one of the more obvious parts of the entire plan. Obviously it was going to revolve around Earth in some way.
But they were scattered through time by the Council, and they were supposed to grant godlike powers, basically immortality. But his experiments destroyed Deimos somehow. We don't find this out yet.
Yeah.
In fact, the script is almost over by the time they tell us. And it gets very Romero-y with its social commentary.
Yeah.
And so the Council turned on him, and so then the Doctor contacts by Holovid and says, sorry I didn't show up like I was supposed to. I'm skipping class to go find this thing. And so he says that he's tracking the creator, which is on its way to this planet called Kurnos. And so they give him permission to go find and stop Varnax. So they are very friendly.
Yeah, too friendly if you ask me.
Yeah, and then the three, they determine that the first crystal must be among the cannibalistic Kern, led by a warlord named Pixelote. And it's a very Mesoamerican sounding name because apparently there was a version of this where instead of being on an alien planet, they were this whole sequence took place among the Inca. That opens a whole can of worms.
It really does. It's just crazy.
And so they land on the planet covered in jungle, and they get captured by the Colonel most immediately, despite Ganji's confidence that he can deal with them. Like, it literally cuts from him, it literally goes from him saying, I can deal with any threat. The Kern show up, and then it cuts to them being held in a cage over a boiling cauldron. And, Korra's giving him shit. And so they're placed over a bubbling cooking pot about to be cooked by the Kern, and they see a round object in the hand of the statue of their singing god, and it's identified by the doctor as a Varian radio probe, and it's transmitting music from Radio City Music Hall, which is strange.
Yeah.
And the doctor apparently just knows that the crystal is inside it somehow.
It doesn't really explain how he knows that, really.
Or how it got inside a radio probe.
No. It's a bit weird.
And so he offers to undergo the test of the cup of reality with Pixelote. And the warlord quaffs the unappealing brew, and then the doctor, apparently it tastes and smells awful, and the doctor just tosses it in his opponent's face, which passes the test, and they're offered all these accommodations, but then Korra's risk communicator goes off with a reminder about the library book, and then the Kern gets spooked, you're like, ooh, evil gods, blah, 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 and then put them in the cage again.
Yeah, it's a bit pointless.
And this is very standard adventure movie stuff.
This feels a lot like the when Spielberg complained about the scripts being too Indiana Jones-like.
Although that would have been much later.
But do you see what I mean, though? It does kind of feel like that.
And it would be interesting to kind of do an Indiana Jones thing, I guess. I don't know. I'm speaking as the Who noob. You're probably going, no, fuck you, fuck you, fuck you.
I mean, it wouldn't be out of the ordinary. I mean, there's been much worse.
Okay. So the Kern, they leave for ritual fasting, which is when the creator arrives.
Yeah.
And Neglos and two warriors enter to snatch the radio probe. And yeah, he has like these warriors. They have like this entire army with them who are like robots, kind of. It's never really explained what they are.
Oh, yeah. I mean, I thought when I read it, it kind of felt like they were... maybe it's because I just watched Hellboy 2, but it kind of felt like the Golden Army. Kind of roboticness.
But they're partly, like, organic at some point, and there's a moment where they, like, crush, like... Because it seems like they bleed at one point.
Oh, I must have missed that, because it felt like they were just straight-up robot.
Because there's a moment where Varnak says to them, I'm going to restore you to your former selves. When he gives his big villain speech later. So they just show up out of nowhere and they are never explained. I feel like these are a holdover from the Mark Ezra version where he had an army.
Yeah.
But so a fight ensues again with two warriors. The two warriors die and Neglos fleeing when the Kern start pounding on the door, so he's a big pussy. And so Neglos, he gets the radio probe, and there's a lot of them. Ganji hacking the limbs off people.
Oh, yeah.
Ganji is just a... Like, the doctor's just like, okay.
Which is really bizarre. I mean, it kind of depends, because if the bad guys he's killing or hacking to pieces, if they are, like I said, because it didn't really strike me as odd if they were robots.
Yeah, but it's very confusing.
I know. And hence at the time it didn't bother me because I was thinking of them as robots, but if you actually think about it, it's a bit more complicated and a bit more problematic.
Yeah, and then he auto calls the TARDIS to him because it's like a fucking Red Dead horse.
And the whole thing about the auto call thing, that's never been a thing, I don't think.
Oh, interesting.
Because if he could just do that, then he could just get out of any situation, surely.
I mean, that would make sense for it to be a thing to have, but if it's never been a thing, that's weird.
No, I mean, there has been times when the TARDIS has been called back, but, I mean, the second episode of Jodie Whittaker, she actually has to go and find it. Yeah. So the recall thing doesn't really make sense.
Yeah, that is very strange. So they flee just as the Kern begin to swarm the TARDIS.
Yeah.
And then on board the Creator, Neglos cracks open the radio probe, extracting the white crystal. And so Varnax takes him and tells Neglos to enter the coordinates for the dark crystal. We're heading into Jim Henson territory, which is a movie someone is trying to get you to review.
Mm-hmm. And I recently bought the DVD and compendium guide, so...
I have a sequel script, so yay.
I'm sure that's mentioned in this compendium guide somewhere.
Yeah, it's getting turned into a Netflix series.
I know that as well. Anyway.
But no, and then he places the white crystal into a giant artifact called the Crucible, which has a vast inky black space inside it, so it's like the ending of Hellraiser Inferno.
Yes. But the Crucible has been weird because... there's been a lot of references on Gallifrey to the cruciform.
Oh, I missed that completely.
Yeah, they talk about the cruciform quite a lot. Not too sure what it means. We don't see it. We don't know what it is. But I just thought that was an interesting correlation there. I don't know if it has any significance.
And there's this whole thing about how, like, they can't time travel until Varnax leaves the Crucible, which is never elaborated on. And then the Doctor is able to pick up the coordinates, tracing them to Earth in the late 20th century in London, because of course.
Of course.
And they trace the crystal to the mineralogy department of a museum. They don't say the British Museum, interestingly.
No, they're very vague.
And here's what's interesting about this sequence, right, is that in a number of the scripts, this was the Smithsonian, and this happened before they went and found the other crystal. They went to this place first and picked up the human companion.
Right.
Which would make more sense.
Yeah. And then give the reason for the human to be in it a bit sooner.
And there's an American tourist named Shane O'Neill. He's hiding from soccer hooligans who were like... He's a backpacker who's going across Europe, and for some reason these soccer hooligans decide to fuck with him.
Well, the skinheads is what they do.
Yeah, I guess they're just pissed off that Arsenal lost.
Probably.
Which, I actually know what that means because I've been reading Hellblazer. And he's hiding in there. He's hiding in the cloakroom. They find the crystal. They get attacked by Neglos and even more warriors. A massive gunfight ensues. And they run into Shane, who helps them escape the building, but he's caught in an explosion, and the Doctor takes him aboard the TARDIS to heal him. Yeah. And so he goes by accident, which you like.
Oh, yeah. I mean, that's not the worst, but the character is so one-dimensional and nothing.
Yeah, Shane is not much. He's just kind of there. Like, the only interesting thing with him is the sort of, like, mentorship he ends up having with Ganji.
Yeah, and he's kind of has this kind of streetwise grifter kind of thing.
And so yeah, they get away, and then Varnax, he berates Neglos for failing. And this Shane character is like, he's completely different from version to version. It's so weird just how many different versions of this character there are. There's this version. There's a version where he's just some guy called Scott who's like working an internship at the Smithsonian. There's a version where he's a streetwise Latino kid named Spanish, which, interestingly enough, you can tell that that this was very close to the Spanish version because he's called Spanish once randomly later on and never again.
Yeah, I remember that now. Yeah.
There's a version where it mostly takes place on an Indian reservation, and he's a Native American named Billy Dreamer.
Yeah.
There's a version where he's a little kid named Billy who's like the genetic duplicate of like either a Varnax, I think. Like there's some weird thing with that I didn't quite figure. So yeah, that's a character who changes a lot.
What's interesting though is that when you think about it, he's this streetwise kid, American, being chased by people who want to do him harm. That sounds very similar to Lee in the film.
Oh, interesting. Oh, the
Chinese guy.
The not so the gang member with a heart of gold.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, that's a very similar depiction when you think about it. So I don't know if that's correlated.
I mean, probably ideas probably filtered down all along.
Oh yeah,
all along through here. And he also, they don't do it in this draft, but a bunch of drafts, whoever the human companion is, sometimes he has a romantic thing going on with Cora, who's sometimes called Lyria. And she has this thing where they go into a special chamber and she determines that they're dynamically compatible, whatever the hell that means.
Right. That's
basically meaning they can fuck.
Yeah, I'm not sure what that makes sense.
Yeah, apparently the reason why, at least at first, why there was never any sort of romantic thing on the show was because the BBC didn't consider that appropriate for children's programming.
Yeah, like I said, because it was originally made just for children, and I didn't think it was appropriate, like you said. So yeah,
which is very strange and parochial, but they are British.
That's the British people, yeah.
And so this would have been like if this had gotten made, this would have been the first time they really explored something like that.
Yeah, and in the actual TV movie, when he kisses the woman Grace, that's the very first time that's ever happened in the show,
and that made people lose their shit.
Yeah, it did.
Justifiably so, would you say?
I didn't see a big deal.
I mean, especially now, considering all the.
Oh, yeah, I mean, there's a lot of stuff going on.
Like, every woman wants the Doctor in New Who.
Yeah, and then you've got his literal wife.
Yeah, let's not get into that.
Oh, don't worry. I'm sure she'll come back, and it's going to be a very interesting episode when she does.
I'm guessing it's complicated.
No, No, not really, but...
Well, that's not what we need to do. So, Shane, he wakes up in the TARDIS's medical bay healed, and the doctor's like, I know your name, but I don't remember you. And I thought this was going to do something really clever, where it's going to be like, oh, he remembers Shane from the future. But no, they don't do that.
No.
But he gets the crystal from Shane, and he calls the Lord President to inform him of the situation. And then back on the Creator, the Varnax is following the TARDIS through the time vortex. And he decides to do something called a vortex jump, which is never done, and it's super dangerous. Again,
we've never heard that term, so we have no reason to fear it. So it's all a bit nonsensical, frankly.
But basically, it's to stop the TARDIS from reaching Gallifrey. It's like, while Cora explains the TARDIS to Shane, the Doctor catches on to what Varnax is trying to do and tries to drop out of the vortex before Varnax finishes the jump, because bad things will happen if they occupy the same space. There's a trippy bit where the Doctor ages rapidly and the others are frozen, but it eventually all fixes itself.
Although, weirdly, I should say as well, there has been a sort of a mini episode in which the TARDIS materializes within itself. And there's a whole complicated episode where they have to resolve it.
Interesting.
So that's interesting, yeah.
But then they fall out of the vortex, I think, but then Neglos and some of his warriors burst in. Man, these warriors are fucking growing on trees at this point.
Yeah.
And because the TARDIS has come to rest inside the Creator. Now, this whole idea of the vortex jump, it's in a bunch of the different versions, but sometimes it's like, it's Varnax has all the crystals and then the Doctor does it himself out of desperation. And in some versions, like, they meld together weirdly, and like they become like the two different TARDISes meld together, so it's like all spread out, like it's weird, trippy.
I did think that's where they were gonna go, but they didn't.
It was gonna be a weird Eschery thing.
Yeah, exactly.
Which is more interesting than this.
Yeah. But the TARDIS always has like weird architecture anyway.
Well, yeah, it is bigger on the inside.
Well, yeah, but it also like has like corridors that go around and upside down and all this ways.
Oh, so like in that Fallout mod.
Yeah, exactly. That was pretty much accurate.
And so Neglos holds Cora at knife point until the Doctor hands over the Dark Crystal, and then the Skeksis are reunited with the Whatsits, and he hands over the Dark Crystal. The Doctor and company are taken before Varnax, and along the way, the Doctor notices that the ship is full of gallium ore. Is that a thing?
No. I mean, gallium is an actual real metal.
Oh, okay. But it's not a Who thing.
Just let me check, because from what I remember, gallium is a metal that has a very low melting point. You can actually literally melt it in the palm of your hand.
Oh.
It's not dangerous at all.
It's another tally to the bullshit list.
Yeah.
And so they get separated, and then the Doctor is taken to a stateroom where he's strapped to a chair. Kinky. And the other three are taken to a cell, and Shane bumps into a guard and snatches his keys, which, okay, I'll give him credit. That was clever.
Yes, and I genuinely thought that when they strapped the Doctor to the chair, that they were going to do what the movie does, which is he has this weird apparatus stuck to his face. Oh. And it's kind of a Clockwork Orange where they like keep his eyes open and stuff.
It's okay. In the stateroom, Zilla speaks to the Doctor, where it turns out that he had a thing for her a long time ago, but she chose Varnax and his promise of power over him. And she says, oh, Doctor, you were jealous of Varnax's superior genius, and that's why you turned against him, and blah, blah, blah. And so then Varnax shows up as well in his massive metal body, just going clunk, 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 which is hilarious. He tries to sway the Doctor to his side, but it doesn't work, and the Doctor insists that using gallium ore as a catalyst will unleash powers that could destroy the universe, which isn't what happened.
No, it's so
weird. But he won't hear it. And it's mentioned here, this is where it's mentioned that the villains need their exoskeletons to survive as a result of whatever the Doctor did to them in the past.
Right.
So, Doctor had an old flame. Are you a fan of that at all?
I mean, it's not unheard of. I mean, like I said, we've already mentioned his wife, but there's never...
he had a granddaughter.
And he had a granddaughter, but... They never mentioned. Nothing about that's ever mentioned again. So that's all new.
Now, and apparently there was a version of this where him losing Zilla to Varnax is why he left and went off traveling the universe.
Again, no.
That sounds bad.
Yeah, that's just made up bollocks.
So, Cora, Ganji, and Shane, they escape from their cell. Ganji takes out multiple warriors, and this is where he crushes their brain box, which is when I realized, oh yeah, they are sort of robotic. And so they burst into the stateroom, and they take hold of Zilla, and they almost get the location of the planet Varnax plans to use as his testing grounds this time. But she slips into the chair and slides away down a secret passage before she reveals anything. I'm like, you know what, Doctor, if you pushed the chair the right way, you might have gotten away.
Yeah.
And the Doctor determines that the Creator's Matrix has the information they need, so they gotta go talk to Neo. So, yeah, what planet is it gonna be? It's gonna be one of two. It's gonna be Earth, or it's gonna be Gallifrey.
Yeah, that's literally the only choices they could possibly think of, frankly.
Place your bets.
Yeah.
And they all head for the bridge to get the needed information, and they get attacked by warriors along the way. Shane and Ganji hold off the warriors at the entrance gantry while Korra tries to retrieve the coordinates. Neglos attacks, and the Doctor fights him off, knocking him out with a large surge of electricity, and takes the TARDIS's remote control back from him. Is that is knocking him out with electricity, is that a very Doctor-like thing?
It's not unheard of, but it's not like a signature move or anything.
Okay, so Korra is able to learn that they plan to fuse the crystals on 20th century Earth, but not where before they are forced to flee into TARDIS. So yeah, Earth.
Yeah, of course.
The budget-conscious period of history.
Yeah. They couldn't afford the massive collars for Gallifrey.
No. They take off, but the vortex jump damaged the TARDIS's time rotor, and they end up on a sailing ship in the 15th century.
That was so random.
Yeah.
It's a really random moment where they meet Christopher Columbus. He gets a little annoyed and then they bugger off.
Yes, and it's like they have to go wandering around on the ship to find like the specific date for some reason, which... Why?
Yeah, it's ludicrous.
Yeah, what happens is that they check his log for the date, and like he wakes up, he sees Korra with Shane's light behind her, and he mistakes her for a vision of the Virgin Mary.
As do.
And then Shane leaves a map of the U.S. in Columbus's cabin before they leave, so he has fucked the time stream.
Yeah, and probably, caused the deaths of many Native Americans.
No, that was already going to happen.
Oh, yeah. This is showing my American history ignorance.
But no, it literally was just like a drawn-out map of the United States, which is not going to mean anything to Christopher Columbus.
No.
Because he didn't get there.
It's all very weird, because it goes nowhere. There's no reason to do it, because why do they need a date? They have the date. They went there. The TARDIS knows all the dates that's ever made. It's ludicrous. There's no reason for it whatsoever. The whole concept is just stupid.
It's just so they can do the Virgin Mary joke.
Yeah, which, again, who cares? We've never seen this person before this, so who cares?
It's just to do a historical gag, I guess. Maybe it's an educational show.
I think it's jumped that sharp decades ago. Although maybe it's coming back for the series. Anyway.
Maybe. But they arrive back in the present, right outside the museum from before. We got to reuse the same locations to keep the budget down.
Yep, very
and then the Doctor needs a new time rotor, so he sends Korra and Ganji into the museum to look for a proton synapse, which he had left there on a previous visit. What?
I don't know what that was. That was just plot convenience.
Yeah, well, he takes Shane to go make a phone call. Yeah. And he also mentions that this is where we finally know what Varnax did. He needs nuclear waste to perform the fusion. And he did the same thing on Deimos before. So it's like, don't use your nuclear power, guys, or some space guy is going to come down and kill you all.
That was a very 80s thing.
And guess what? Nuclear... Yeah, it's like, okay, what is this like? Like, what are we? Are we protesting Mr. Burns here?
Yeah.
And then we see Neglos and some warriors. They take control of a nuclear waste silo. And Varnax and Zilla, they enter the Crucible together to begin the fusion. Ooh.
Oh, yeah, it's all very mysterious, but it doesn't explain what's happening, why it's happening, and what's going to happen after it, so there's no reason to care.
It's just like something very, very bad is going to happen. That's it.
Well, they say it's bad, but again, we have no context.
Yeah, but that's all we say is something bad.
Yeah, that's it as well. Yeah, it is literally that.
Okay, so Shane, he uses his street smarts again to help the Doctor get the money to make the phone call because the Doctor can't figure out a way to make the phone work.
Well, if he had his sonic screwdriver, he would.
Yeah, and he speaks to the Brigadier
in a random cameo that again completely throwaway.
Who is in the Falklands observing penguins.
Yeah.
And he tells him that the location is somewhere up north in Yorkshire, I think.
Yeah.
And okay, the Brigadier cameo in the original Mark Ezra draft, this is really weird, right? Because not only does he play a bigger role and he uses his tanks to help fight off Varnax's army, which lands at Stonehenge, but when the Doctor calls him up, he's on a golf course with his wife.
Yeah.
And they are playing with their friends, Basil and Sybil.
Fucking hell.
A Faulty Towers reference.
Faulty Towers is in the Doctor Who universe. Jesus Christ.
Why? Could you get John Cleese to do that?
That's ludicrous.
It makes the Basil Fawlty joke in Deadpool seem not meta.
Yeah.
That is just weird. And so, okay, Cora and Ganji, they managed to sneak the proton synapse out of the museum by pretending that she's pregnant, which is just bizarre.
Yeah, and it doesn't really last that long because he drops the damn thing anyway.
It's very strange.
Mm.
But the Doctor manages to lose the TARDIS when a phone company truck replaces it with a newer styled police box. And he can't call it back because he left the remote control inside.
I mean, what's the point in having a recall switch when you don't keep it with you?
You'd think there would be safeguards to keep someone from taking it like that.
Yeah. Well, that does happen. I mean, in the 50th, I think it's a unit. They just literally craned it for the helicopter.
Yeah, but you think there would be safeguards to keep people from just... Was the Doctor aware they were doing that?
No.
Well, okay, because I was going to say, like, you think there'd be like a weird gravity thing to keep it in place or something.
Well, according to the canon, it takes on the weight of what its outer dimensions are. Because there is a point where the TARDIS becomes like tiny, and it's like you can just pick it up with your hands.
Ah.
So it takes on the weight of the dimensions of the outer shell, you see.
But still, security doesn't know the meaning of it. That's my point.
Yeah, it's true. It is weird, but it does happen quite a lot that the TARDIS just gets nicked.
But it seems, I will say, I had more of a problem with it before I started watching the new season where she loses it immediately.
Yeah, yeah.
Okay, and so the Doctor and company, the only reason they do this is that we can have this gag where they have to ride a train north of the facility and they're mingling with drunken soccer fans, and they meet the skinheads again. It's just there for a goofy joke so they can mill around with the populace.
It's true. And they offer them some Nuki Brown. Specifically written like that. Newcastle Brown Ale.
And so while this is going on, the Crucible is lowered into the silo along with a rod of gallium ore, which starts reacting with the nuclear waste. And so the Doctor and company, finally, they arrive at the facility and make their way inside, taking out warriors as they go. And they make it inside the operations bunker, where after some requisite technobabble, I've worked some Trek references into my notes, the Doctor determines that he needs to enter the Crucible to stop what's going on. And so the Cora is lowering the Doctor onto the Crucible with a nearby winch. When he climbs down to the side platform Varnax and Zilla used as an entrance, their life support systems, they're cast aside near the hatch. And it's like, okay. And this was actually kind of a funny moment where she's lowering him down and he's like actually kind of worried. That was pretty funny. And so around now, a bunch of warriors burst into the room, but are successfully fought off by Shane and Ganji. So this is where Shane gets kind of cool. Him and Ganji start kicking ass together.
Oh yeah, I mean, and it is a little bit interesting.
Yeah, like this is where the thing gets interesting because it's like finally there's like stakes and drama and whatnot. It's not just kerblam randomness.
Yeah, true.
And so Neglo sees that they're getting their asses handed to him, and he orders his men to withdraw, and then he goes, oh, hey, there's a service hatch here down the tunnel, and so he enters that.
Mm.
And so the Doctor, he enters the Crucible, and he finds Varnax's control device on his discarded exoskeleton, that was outside my notes are like weird and random now. But he enters the inky blackness, finding a beautiful garden inside.
Yes.
But he cups the water from the fountain and it turns into slime in his hand. So basically, whatever the fusing crystals are going to do, it's kind of an illusion.
Mm. That's the idea. It's not really clear.
It's a bit vague and nebulous.
Yeah, as everything is.
Back outside in the bunker, Neglos leads some warriors through the service shaft behind Shane and Ganji and hides himself in the room. Says, big dude in an exoskeleton can just blend right the fuck in. And Cora alerts the two men to the warriors, whom they manage to fight off, and then Ganji goes to check on the service shaft, and then Neglo sneaks up behind him and mortally wounds him with a stab in the back. And then Shane swoops in to attack, and he shoves Neglos over the side. Like, they kind of do it together.
Yeah.
Where he melts to death among the superheated ore and waste, and okay, that was kind of a cool death scene for a bad guy. I mean, no word on whether he did a thumbs up.
True.
I mean, the Doomslayer can do it.
Oh, yeah.
And so Ganji is like, oh, I'm going to die. So he gives his saber to Shane. He goes like, you're a true warrior with your last breath.
It's
blah, blah, blah.
I mean, that whole thing about him being a true warrior and he has a warrior past and all, it's a bit ridiculous, a bit contrived.
Yeah. I actually forgot to type out that thing about the past. There's this whole thing about how he's a descendant of Shane O'Neill, the king of Ulster, and that's why the Doctor recognizes his name.
Yeah.
Which is, okay, kind of interesting in a Robert E. Howard kind of way, but it's not really developed enough to really mean a whole lot in the context of this script.
No.
Okay, so back inside the Crucible, sadly Daniel Day-Lewis is nowhere to be seen. The Doctor finds 2 statues of Varnax and Zilla in their prime, and then finds the 2 lying on couches in something called a regeneration pavilion, which is annoying because Word doesn't want to recognize pavilion.
Yeah, and plus, I mean, there is things similar sounding in the actual canon. You have the regeneration matrix.
But this isn't that.
No, it's a completely different idea.
But they're laying there fully restored, and the fused crystals are floating above them. And they stand up. They offer the gift of immortality to the Doctor, who refuses, saying it's just an illusion, like the garden. Blah blah blah.
In the most ridiculous thing, the Doctor shoots and intending to kill him.
Yep, he just uses a gun.
He just straight up shoots him, which is arguably the most non-Doctor Who thing you could possibly ever do ever. It's ludicrously stupid. There's no way he would do that.
Jodie Whittaker would be freaking the fuck out at him if she was there.
Yeah, I mean, well, frankly, they all would. They all abhor violence, especially the shooting of guns.
He tries shooting him, but he has the power of instant regeneration now, so he's basically fucking Wolverine.
Or Captain Jack.
Well, let's not talk about Captain Jack.
No, that's okay.
Although he will probably get us high tonight and take you to a special island. Throwing a bone to the Billy Joel fans. But so the Doctor goes, fuck this, and he shoots the crystals, and he destroys the white one, which for some reason kills Zilla.
Yeah, it's weird. There's a lot of that where we just say it's weird.
Yeah, that's this whole script. Yeah. Varnax, he begins to deform, and he says that he has become one with the dark crystal, blah, 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 blah. Which means he now has really creepy, unexpressive face. And he then retracts the Gallium ore from the waste, saying, Earth is already minutes away from doom, which it's fucking not.
No.
And so the Doctor, he basically just transforms into this bizarre monster.
Isn't it labeled as Dark Varnax as well?
Yes, and they continue to talk, and apparently extracting the Gallium ore is now a bad thing, which I'm not really sure why.
Yeah, I don't know why either.
And Doctor is like, I managed to blow up the device you're using to control the silo, blah, 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 and it's begun entombing procedures. And so we got a ticking clock.
Yeah.
And so this is where Varnax turns into the giant monster, and the Doctor goes, fuck, and starts running away, which admittedly got a laugh. And he exits the Crucible, distracts Dark Varnax with his old life support system. He makes it out of there just in time for the steel shields to shut and trap Varnax in the Crucible inside the silo. And the Doctor takes a moment to mourn Ganji before they leave. They're sitting out there in the fields with his corpse, just going sad.
Yeah, there's a brief moment where they're like, sad, and then they just leave.
Would that technically kill Varnax, though?
It's hard to say. I mean...
It's very strange.
Yeah, I mean, let's be honest. Big bad guys don't have a tendency of dying anyway in Doctor Who.
He's just sitting there in the fucking hole in the ground going, rah, 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 for all eternity.
Yeah, well, it's happened before.
And so that ends, and the 3 are hitchhiking, which is just weird.
Yeah, that was weird, where it's like they're in, what was it? Some car, and...
The car turns out to be the TARDIS.
The car turns out to be the TARDIS. It's like, what? Why?
And that's the end.
Yeah.
And Shane kind of becomes a companion, I think.
Yeah, pretty much. That's the implication.
So that script, I think, just as a science fiction story, the ideas here are workable.
I think there are individual ideas are workable, not all of them, though.
The quest for immortality idea, I think, is workable. And I like the idea of this whole personal relationship these two had, they were friends and then they went different ways. I think you could make a good movie out of those ideas.
I mean, that's basically the Master and the Doctor.
Yeah, they were old friends.
Yeah, so...
But it's just this draft specifically just feels sloppily structured.
Yeah.
It goes on and on. You don't really know what's going on or what anything means.
And there's just a crap ton of detail that doesn't need to be there.
And the character, this feels like it's just a mishmash of different ideas. Now, some of those other drafts where it actually sets all that stuff up immediately instead of going, oh hey, Doctor and Drag.
Yeah.
Those sound like they could potentially be better and would be worth reading, but I don't think those exist anywhere right now. I've seen the Mark Ezra script on the list, and I've seen one of the other things I'll talk about in a minute.
Right.
So basically, Johnny Byrne, he took this whole concept through different phases, and eventually Dalton Reyes, they got another producer on board, and they started moving a little bit quicker. But they had problems basically getting any studio to sign on for it because BBC Enterprises held on to the merchandising rights and all the peripheral stuff, which is basically something that anybody who's going to buy the film rights is going to want those as well to be able to exploit them. So they had trouble with that, but then they hired on this new producer who sort of invigorated everything. And then Byrne moved on to a different storyline, which was called Last of the Time Lords, where basically Varnax is in it, but he's more space Hitler, and he wants to he's basically used as like an analog for fascism.
Yeah.
And he wants to use like a TARDIS to conquer everything, and so the Time Lords basically destroy every TARDIS and wipe themselves out from existence, but the Doctor can't bring himself to do it, so he hides the TARDIS and then wipes away his memory, and he ends up being held in like a Victorian asylum.
See, that's really weird because, first of all, that's the opposite of what happened, as in the Time Lords didn't want to stop and the Doctor made them. But also, there is a two-parter where the Doctor goes into hiding and wipes his memory and becomes human. And that's a really good, I think it's a three-parter actually, and it's really good episode as well. So it's interesting that there's a lot of correlation with the actual episodes.
And what's interesting is that, like, in Varnax, depending on, there was like two different versions, I think. In one version, he was like this really good genetic scientist who implanted this gene in humanity early on, which means he can activate anybody to be his sleeper agent, which is kind of interesting. And there's another version where he basically is like, he basically becomes like a fascist, and he has people who work for him, and there's the Doctor who is not all himself yet. There's one where he kills a guy with a karate chop,
yeah,
and he dunks another guy in acid, and it's all very odd.
Yeah.
And basically it has to be like the Doctor has to find the TARDIS and keep it away from Varnax.
Yeah.
So that version went away because that producer who came on board struck a deal with this French company called Lumiere, and they decided they wanted a more established writer, so they threw out the Byrne stuff. And at first, they went to Nicholas Meyer, who was the writer and director of Star Trek II and Star Trek VI, and he co-wrote Star Trek IV, but he decided he wanted to take a break from science fiction after VI. So I'm like, that shows they're putting their minds in the right place. They're going to a guy who knows what to do.
It's true.
Because he wasn't a fan of Star Trek before he made Star Trek II, but he researched it and did the best damn job he could.
Yeah, because in some ways you don't want a fan to look at it because they'll become biased and they'll make their story rather than making the right story, if that makes sense.
But you also need you need a balance.
You do. It's true. You do need a balance, but you can kind of understand the thought process there. You know.
Yeah, and so he pointed to his Star Trek VI co-writer Denny Martin Flynn, whom they hired to write the script. And he said he hadn't seen Doctor Who, or he had maybe seen very little of it, but he watched like the most like highly thought of serials, as many as he could. And so he constructed his script, and his version was the Doctor trying to keep this evil immortal called the Mandrake,
right?
Who rather annoyingly, because in the book the L'Officiers they point out that he's basically a master XP, but they insist on just referring to him as the master when in the script he was not.
Right.
And in the interview they do with the writer, he says, yeah, we wanted to do the master, but we were told we couldn't, so we spun him off into his own direction, and it was better for it.
Huh.
So they got a little fanboyish there.
Yeah.
And so the idea of that script was basically he was trying to find all the different segments to the key to time to keep the Mandrake from getting them. Which apparently the key to time was a Tom Baker thing.
Possibly. I'm not sure. Can't recall.
And there was this whole thing where they worked in a...
Oh, wait, no, sorry, the key to time. Yeah, I know exactly what you're talking about. Sorry, carry on.
Yeah, and they worked in a cameo of Tom Baker's Doctor hiding one of the pieces, and they run into each other and have a little conversation.
Right, okay, I know what you're talking about.
Yeah, and it doesn't sound that bad. And they actually worked in interestingly enough, they worked in this whole thing where the Doctor is on the Titanic, and then the Mandrake chucks him overboard, and that's when his first regeneration happens.
Right.
And the reason why they worked this in there is because they wanted Pierce Brosnan, and he wasn't signed on yet, and they needed to get started really quickly, so they wrote in this whole sequence where we could have a different Doctor, where he's in in the Lake Country in England, I think, after that, and he gets visited by the monk.
Oh, the monk, yeah.
And so they wrote that whole sequence in so they could film something and technically start production early.
Right.
But that, of course, didn't happen.
Yeah.
And so I would really like to read that just to see how good or bad it is. It actually doesn't sound that bad based on the plot summary in the book.
Yeah, I mean, it doesn't. It certainly sounds one of the better ones, anyway.
And so Flynn suggested Leonard Nimoy to direct, and Nimoy was up for it, and they were working on it, and they just... Basically what happened is that the deadline came up that they had to meet, and they didn't meet it, and the BBC refused any more extensions because they started working with Amblin at this point. And in and amongst all this happening, there was plans for his anniversary film called The Dark Dimension, which would have brought back all the available doctors and all this stuff. But that didn't end up happening because it was the business side of the company that was trying to get it made, and they didn't have the means to do it. And that eventually turned into those not-for-profit shorts that they did.
Yes.
And so Amblin Television and the producer Philip Segal, they took over trying to develop something, and there was all these different things where it's like the Doctor would visit World War II, and the Master was going to be in it, and you'd find out that the Master was his half-brother, and that the Doctor's mother was human.
All terrible ideas.
And like his father was a Time Lord and was also the Pharaoh Khufu.
Yep, it was nonsensical.
And the Daleks were involved in one, and they were redesigned to look kind of spider-like.
Okay, that's an odd choice.
And Davros is in there somewhere.
Of course.
And there were two different versions like that where they were playing around with those two ideas, and then Spielberg and Amblin walked away, and eventually it ended up moving over to Fox, where they did the Matthew Jacobs version, which is the Paul McGann movie.
Right. And thus ends the circle.
The son becomes the father, and the father becomes the son color. So yeah, I'd actually like to read that Denny Martin Flynn version if it ever...
Yeah, I think I would too.
And yeah. So yeah, that was Doctor Who on the whole.
I mean, the script was awful. I'm sorry, it really was.
The script was... I didn't mind the last 30 pages or so just as a movie. But on the whole, it was just a mess.
It was just a complete mess that just made no sense. It's a pointless nonsense. I just didn't like it at all.
Both as a movie and as Doctor Who.
Yeah, because neither worked, frankly. I just couldn't see it. And like I said, I liked the TV movie. So I have no problem just saying we got a good one.
You got the best one possible.
I wouldn't go that far, but we certainly got something okay.
Yeah, but we could have gotten pre-Bond Pierce Brosnan as the Doctor.
No.
Whether that's a good thing or a bad thing.
No.
You don't like that?
No. No. Terrible idea.
You don't like Pierce Brosnan?
I don't like Pierce Brosnan as the Doctor. He's not weird enough for the Doctor.
Yeah, I guess that's true.
Because let's be honest, everyone who's played him, even if they've been kind of like pretty boys like David Tennant, they still have a touch of weirdness about them.
I always thought David Tennant was a little bit funny looking.
It's true, but that's kind of the point. I mean, when you think about it, the new Who Doctors are positively normal looking considering the previous lot.
Yeah, he was maybe a little bit purple.
I mean...
Okay, that was a terrible joke.
Yeah, I mean, they're not meant to be, attractive. It's more about the mind, the intelligence. So I don't like the idea of like there was some ideas to get Tom Cruise in on this, which is just ridiculous.
Well, I mean, he is ageless.
Well, yeah, but that's because he has pure insanity fueled into his heart.
Maybe Tom Cruise as the Master.
Possibly. But no.
And I like Tom Cruise, but that's just a weird idea.
Yeah.
But okay, I think we've talked Doctor Who long enough.
Yeah. I mean, there's not much else we can go into, to be honest.
I have a feel like this is going to be a longer episode, but we kind of needed all that introduction so that people knew what we were talking about.
Yeah, because the people who know Doctor Who know it, but the people who don't have no idea. Like, I mean, I'm not trying to insult you or anything, but you didn't know anything prior to watching it, did you?
I mean, I had seen like someone do like a summary video of it, where they went, we have this doctor, but it had been years.
Right, yeah. So it is possible that there are people out there who have no idea.
It's possible. There are people out there, including one particular Star Trek writer, who thinks that Vulcans use lightsabers. So,
right, okay.
Whom we've covered a script by that person before.
Yeah, so I think that's a good place to end.
Yeah. Yeah, they wrote Threshold to give you a hint.
Okay.
But alright, that more or less covers it. So until whatever the fuck comes next, which I actually already know, but I'm not going to say it because I'm a dick like that. Until next time, guys. Let me get that out. Let me get the recorder up one so I can actually hit the button.
Okay.
Bye.
Take care. Bye.